Good evening, everyone. It is 6 p.m., and I would like to call this meeting of the Huntersville Board of Commissioners to order. If you would please take your cell phones out, turn them on vibrate, or turn them off, we would greatly appreciate it, and everyone up here will do the same. All right, now if we will join us for a moment of silence. Now, if you'll please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're now going to open it up for staff questions for the board members. Does anyone have a question for staff at this time? Commissioner Kovacs.
Any chance there's an update on Town Hall?
Bobby over here. Bobby's in the back.
I apologize. I think we're all a little discombobulated. We started at 4:45 and trying to pull back in so that we don't run out of time, or at least that we stay on schedule. How about that? Mr. Williams?
Hey, yes, so town hall update was the question.
Yes.
We are moving through, we've gotten through schematic design. We're working through the consultant and the architect with design documents to get us to construction documents, and that is where we are right now.
So you don't need me to bring my shovel yet?
Not yet, but they're working to identify early packages as it relates to the construction design documents, and hopefully next month or two we'll be back with more information, some visuals, and maybe Wendy can grab that shovel.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll now move into public comments, requests, and presentations. The first up is 6A, and this is the medic response configuration update presentation. Mr. Peterson, welcome to Huntersville.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
I appreciate the opportunity to present to you this evening regarding response configuration changes that we are undergoing at Medic. My name is John Peterson. I go by JP. I'm the executive director at Medic. With me tonight, I also have Dr. Doug Swanson. He's our medical director. He's going to speak as well. And Dr. John Studnick is our deputy director of operations. And so throughout the presentation, all three of us will be doing a slide or two. Before I get into the slides, though, just kind of a quick reminder of who Medic is and how we operate a little bit. So we are your sole 911 EMS provider in Mecklenburg County. So we are the only one that does the ambulance transports for 911. We also do the majority of non-emergency interfacility transports as well, although the hospital systems each have their own interfacility transports that they utilize most predominantly for very sick critical care patients between facilities. By state statute, EMS is the responsibility of the county, and back in 1997, the county formed Medic as a joint agency between the county, Medic, and what was known then as the Mecklenburg Hospital Authority, now known as Atrium Health. We are governed by a board of commissioners. That board of commissioners is appointed by the Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners and contains 3 personnel from Novant Health, 3 personnel from Atrium Health, and 1 from Mecklenburg County. That is the board to whom I report directly and has direct oversight of Medic. So just a little bit of just some basics as we get started. And before I forget regarding funding, so Medic is funded about 75% of the revenue that Medic generates comes in the form of fees for service. That is the bills that we send for transports and the revenue that we collect from our transports. The other 25% or so of our revenue comes in the form of subsidy from Mecklenburg County. So we're here to talk to you tonight about some proposed changes to our response configuration. We hope through this presentation to cover the why are we looking to make changes, what we intend to change, and for this slide I want to focus a little bit on the who, but just really quick, I want to say that the purpose of this changes is to make sure we're sending the right resource to the right patient in the right amount of time. And it's been a very collaborative effort over the last year. We've included our fire department partners and our police department partners throughout this process, because what we wanted to have as an end product is a response configuration that works for all first responders, regardless of police or fire or medic, as well as what we think is going to be the best for our community countywide here in Mecklenburg County. So as you can see, we've had quite a lot of collaboration. So let this kind of come up here. So why change response configuration? First of all, our responses versus our transports are misaligned. And what I mean by that is about 75 or 76% of the time that medic goes out on a call for service right now, we are responding with our lights and sirens in emergency mode as if it is a life or death emergency. What we know is that once we arrive on scene and do an evaluation of the patient, only about 5% of the time is the patient actually having a life-threatening emergency and is transported to the hospital with lights and sirens. So we have a disparity, a large disparity in what we are responding to versus what we are transporting, and we believe that we need to make some changes there. Some other additional information for you regarding that. In the last 5 years, we've seen a 33% increase in our sickest patients. Those are what we call priority 1 patients. These are significant stroke patients, cardiac arrest patients, severe trauma patients, things like that. Significant increase in that. At the same time, we've seen a similar significant increase in calls for service from patients who have very low acuity complaints. These could be anything from somebody needing to refill medications to something that is not really a medical priority at all. This combination amongst the way that our current response structure is in place, which has not changed in over 25 years, is prohibiting us from being able to respond as quickly as possible as we would like to our sickest patients, those priority 1 patients. So we need to realign and we need to rethink how we do responses in Mecklenburg County to make sure that we have the right resources available to respond in the quickest manner for those sickest patients. One of the things that we intend to do, as I mentioned on the previous slide, we have a very heavy use of lights and sirens in this system, more so than many other EMS systems in the United States. We've known from many years of research now that the use of lights and sirens is probably one of the most, if not the most dangerous things that we do in EMS. We know from research and data that when we put our lights and sirens on and respond to calls, emergency in our community, it increases our chances for a crash by 50%. EMS really hasn't been around that long. It's only been around for about 50 years or so in its current configuration form nationwide. And when EMS started back in the 70s, really we didn't have the type of technology, we didn't have the type of equipment, the type of training, the type of data, and the things that we have today that we didn't have back then. And back then, all we knew is we needed to go fast. We literally had ambulance drivers back then. Today we have paramedics. Things have changed. We need to evolve with the system with that. There have been numerous studies, including, let's see if this has more, sorry, I thought there was one more. There's been numerous studies, including a white paper by the National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration back in 2017, almost a 100-page document that looked at EMS and fire responses nationwide, and the federal government at that point made requests for EMS and fire personnel to look at the use of lights and sirens and consider reducing that. In just February of 2022, there was a position paper signed by 14 different large nationwide entities, including the American Ambulance Association, the International Association of Fire Chiefs, amongst others, that supports the reduction of lights and sirens by EMS and fire personnel nationwide. When you see the percentage that we are responding to calls with lights and sirens versus the percent of patients who actually need it, it's a staggering number that we need to realign, and we'll go into specifics with you here in just a minute about exactly what we intend to do with that. But for now, what I'd like to do is to invite Dr. Studnick up, and he is going to go over tip to tail for you a basic call of what happens when someone calls 911 in Mecklenburg County.
Great, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for having us today to explain these changes. So, a little bit of context before we get started with this slide. In this calendar year, Medic's 911 Communications Center will answer more than 165,000 calls for medical service. Those 165,000 calls for medical service need to be sorted into a priority. Not everybody that calls 911 has the same level of illness or injury. And so we have to do our best when we talk to our callers to understand what the patient's needs are. And the purpose of talking to patients on the phone to understand their needs is to help us accomplish a couple of things. It helps us determine the type of resources that we need to send to a call, what boundaries do we have on how quickly we should dispatch the call and how quickly we should get there, and whether or not we should transport with red lights and sirens. In Mecklenburg County, we operate a tiered EMS service. What that means is when we talk about resources, you have fire department first responders, and you have medic, the ambulance service. Fire department first responders' core job is fire protection, and secondarily, they participate in the EMS system as medical first responders. They're located within a community, and their job is to arrive on scene, quickly assess a patient to determine if they have life-threatening illness or injury. If they do have some ability to start to render aid before the ambulance gets there. The ambulance then arrives and we make a disposition decision. Does the patient need to be transported to a hospital or not? Medic manages the transport and the first responders go available, and then we spend the next 20 to 50 minutes with a patient transporting them to a hospital, turning over care, and managing that patient while the first responder is available then to respond in their community for either the next medical patient or whatever other type of emergency may occur for the fire department. So when a call comes in, if you have ever dialed 911, first you talk to what is called a primary PSAP, Public Safety Answering Point, in Mecklenburg County that's operated by the City of Charlotte, Cornelius, or Pineville. And the primary PSAP you talk to depends upon the location you are calling from. So in Huntersville, primarily, you're going to talk to the City of Charlotte PSAP. They will ask you a very quick question. Do you need police, fire, or medic? If you're having a medical emergency and you ask for medic, one button push transfer brings that call into Medic's 911 Communication Center. One of our trained emergency medical dispatchers will then answer the phone. An emergency medical dispatcher is a North Carolina state-certified healthcare provider. They are trained to take calls and determine the level of illness or injury a patient may have on the phone. So they will pick up the phone, they will verify the address of the emergency, because we can't help anybody if we don't know where anybody is. And sometimes that's frustrating for callers because they want to get to telling us a story, but we first need to know where they're at. And then once we understand their location, we go through a protocol called Medical Priority Dispatch. Medical Priority Dispatch is a protocol used here in Mecklenburg County, within the United States and worldwide, as the standard for assessing a patient's illness or injury. We ask a patient a very important series of questions, and as they answer those questions, the patient becomes sorted into a level. At the end of asking our questions, a patient will have a call type determined. And through the use of emergency medical dispatch techniques, this protocol, we end up with a code or a determinant. That determinant will tell us what resources a patient needs, what time we should dispatch that call and how quickly we should respond to it, and whether we should go red lights and sirens. There are about 1,200 determinants in medical priority dispatch, and our job is to sort those determinants into call classifications for the right mode of response the right resources, and the right time. What our response configuration does is ultimately take those 1,200 codes and put them into a logical order so that we can dispatch the right resources. So I'll move to this slide, which is our current response configuration. So currently, we take those 1,200 codes and we sort them into 4 basic categories. And these are the categories that JP mentioned earlier that haven't changed since 1997. We have a response time target, immediate dispatch of an ambulance of our highest acuity patients in 10 minutes and 59 seconds. We send first responder resources on those with their red lights and sirens, and that takes about 20% of our call volume. Next, we have this really large group of patients at 49% of our call volume, which we immediately dispatch, send first responders, and everybody responds red lights and sirens. This is where we start to see that mismatch between how we're responding and what we actually see. These two combined together are 69% of our response volume. And if we remember, only 5% of the time do we see a patient that actually has a life-threatening emergent condition. We have a 60-minute response time window where a patient will call in and they're very low acuity, and we will manage the EMS system before we send an ambulance. And what that means is we will account for how many ambulances are available to take a call, where are they positioned, do we need to reposition resources so that they're prepared for a higher acuity call before we dispatch this low acuity call. This 60-minute response time target is actually one change that occurred post-1997. In fact, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, we had a high need for resources. There were many high acuity and low acuity calls coming into our system. We were impacted from a staffing perspective with staff having illness and departures. We needed to manage low acuity volume difference. So in the middle of the pandemic, we went to our medical control board and our agency board and asked for permission to have a low acuity 60-minute response, which they provided to us. Now, we made that change in an emergency. And what we know is that there are some patients in that 60-minute response time window today that likely need a higher level of service, likely need a little bit better customer service than 60 minutes. And so we want to make sure that we can get that service to these patients, and that's another reason why we're going through this formal evaluation and change to our response configuration. And the final line we have down there is a little bit of alphabet soup, and this is our referral program. If a patient calls Medic, goes through our screening, and is determined to be very, very low acuity, not sick, we will transfer them to a nurse advice line, to poison control, or to a crisis nurse. And that nurse, that crisis nurse or poison control, will attempt to help the patient manage their problem without an ambulance response. Sometimes those patients do need transport to a facility, likely an emergency department, though not emergently. And a nurse will transfer that caller back to us and say, well, this patient doesn't really need ambulance transport, but they don't have a different method to get to the hospital. They don't know how they're going to get there. And so we will offer that patient a ride share. If the patient is accepting of that, we'll dispatch a ride share, a Lyft or an Uber to that patient. Medic covers the cost for that, and that patient gets to the hospital. If the patient's unable to use a ride share, doesn't want to, we'll send an ambulance, but we have a 90-minute target to get to that patient, because really what they need is a ride, and we will provide that service for them, but we're going to do it in a way that helps us manage the system and allows us to have resources available for the higher acuity calls while we wait to service that low acuity call. So on this next slide is where we're moving to. So in the future, you will see that our initial highest acuity group of patients, 10-minute and 59-second immediate ambulance dispatch, first responders, red lights and sirens, remains relatively unchanged, 19% of our volume. You'll reflect, it was 20% on the last slide. It's 19% here. We are very certain of who our highest acuity patients are. We're going to make sure we have a rapid response, immediate dispatch to those patients. Where we change is this next line. This next line, we're going to have a 15-minute response. It's an immediate ambulance and first responder dispatch. So we will dispatch without hesitation. all of the resources, but we're going to go not lights and sirens to these calls. So we're going to turn down our lights and sirens, respond, and take care of our patient. Some of these calls will have first responders, some of them won't. We will send first responders to those calls in which we think that their arrival will have an opportunity to provide care that may impact the outcome of the patient. For those patients that the tools that our first responders have may not align with their needs, we'll reserve first responders for other higher acuity calls, and we will just send an ambulance. So the important thing to note here is we will have immediate dispatch of resources on these patients, and we've increased our response time from 13 minutes to 15 minutes. So a mild increase to manage the change of not transporting or not responding red lights and sirens. The next group is a 30-minute response time window. As I said, in our emergent need during the pandemic, we pushed many patients into a 60-minute response time window. We know some of those patients probably should have a quicker response, and so we moved many of those into this 30-minute response time window. Some patients will have a first responder dispatched, some will not. Both medic and the first responders will be dispatched simultaneously, but there may be a minor delay in dispatch as we process higher acuity calls, make sure the 10-minute calls and the 15-minute calls get out and get assigned before we assign these 30-minute calls. We retain a 60-minute window of service. There's no changes there. We don't send first responders on those today. We won't in the future. The 90-minute responses I spoke about are those responses that come back from the nurse advice line that are referred only for a transport. We have our referral network in place, and we have one other call type, which we call first responder only responses. In the city of Charlotte, we've been operating first responder only responses for about 5 years. These are minor incidents that are typically referred to us by the police department. Think, 2 vehicles have been involved in a collision in a parking lot. And the police aren't able to articulate if anybody is actually hurt and there's minor damage to the vehicles. We send the first responders, they assess, make sure there isn't any, fluid spilled on the ground or there's no, threat to anything relative to the vehicles themselves, understand and look and see, are there any patients? There aren't any patients. They don't dispatch an ambulance. We preserve resources for higher acuity calls. They respond and then clear the call because there are no patients there. So we've been operating this in the city. We're going to roll this out to the rest of the county coming up in the next several weeks. And so those encapsulate where we are moving. The biggest change really is turning off red lights and sirens for that middle acuity group, but still having immediate ambulance and first responder dispatch and managing those patients, providing some patients a quicker response that are getting a 60-minute response today by getting them a 30-minute response when we implement. Dr. Swanson is going to come up and talk to us really quickly about our experience with low acuity patients. So we have 30-minute and 60-minute response time targets. And a lot of people want to know, is it safe to wait that long for an ambulance? And he will describe our experience to date with that.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Commission, and thank you, Mayor, for having us as well. Is it safe? I'm here to let everyone know that, yes, this is safe. As John and JP have both mentioned, the responses to the highest acuity patients is not going to change, and that's what we want to protect. We want to protect our ability to respond in a rapid fashion to those patients with the most critical illness or injury. In this larger group, we looked at 18 months worth of data. Now I have up to 18 months worth of data, looking at the patients in that 60-minute response window. Now, a couple things to note. Even though it's a 60-minute response window, the average response time to these patients was 32 minutes, still much quicker than the 60 minutes. Of those, 12,900, now we're up to 20,000 responses. Less than 1% of them result in an emergent transport to the hospital. And when you look at that number, it's about 0.7%. And of that 0.7%, About 25% of them, because of the way the system was at the time, we responded to in less than 10 minutes and 59 seconds anyhow. So again, by being able to manage the system, protects all the patients. Of this group here, 65% of them were transported to the hospital. 35% don't receive a transport. They decline, they cancel, they turn the ambulance, there is something additional that they realize that really they don't need or want an ambulance to transport them to the emergency department. Myself and two partners, one from Atrium Health and one from Novant Health, look at 100% of the calls in this category that did generate a priority transport to the emergency department. And to date, even adding in the additional time now through where we are now, 20,000 of these responses, we do not have a case that we can identify any adverse impact to the patient related to the response time. So it is very safe. These patients get what they need from a medical healthcare standpoint. They don't need it in 10 minutes and 59 seconds. They don't need it in 12 minutes and 59 seconds, but they do need assistance, and we want to provide that assistance to them. But we know that in a very low acuity fashion, taking a little bit of extra time here benefits the system as a whole. And as I said, what we want to do as much as anything is protect that response to the highest acuity patients. And this enables us to make sure that we have assets appropriately positioned to respond to those patients.
Just one more slide. Thanks, Dr. Swanson. So as both Dr. Swanson and Dr. Studnick mentioned, a key point here with regard to how this is going to impact your community here in Huntersville is our rapid response to life-threatening emergencies in Mecklenburg County will not change. That will continue as it is today, and we hope will actually even get better as a result of the changes that we're proposing here. With reducing lights and sirens usage for both the fire department and for medic, we believe that we will be increasing safety not only for our employees, for our patients, and for our community and the motoring public at large. In doing this, we will have a response that better aligns with the needs of the system and the demands of the system. Just the last couple bits here. So I just wanted to let you know some of the work that Medic has been doing. Like I said, this has been a year-long ongoing process. We are going around to each town and city council in the community giving this presentation. We also have district meetings for with the public, community meetings in each of the 6 county districts. We've already held 5 of those. We have one more this week here in North County in Cornelius. And we have one more town council presentation to make next week, and then we will have completed our tour of that. These are the locations of those. So it's going to be at the North Regional Rec Center on Wednesday at 6:30. This Wednesday at 6:30. And so with that, we are open for any discussion, questions, or feedback that you might have.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. Commissioner Munger.
Yeah, can we go back to a couple of the graphs you had, or grids? One before that, and one before that.
This one.
All right.
Yes, sir.
This was included in our packet, and maybe I'm just a number person, and it just kind of freaks me out. I have no idea what this says. And I want you to know that when I look at this, it tells me absolutely nothing. The one thing I'm trying to figure out, if it's 10:59 response time, is that like a critical level response?
Yes.
And okay, and the star indicates that that's sirens on.
Correct.
Okay. Some sort of note that says that that's the level that's going on here, because you basically have 4 different values that tell me absolutely nothing.
Yes.
As board members, and maybe I should only speak on my behalf, health, medical background, 0. And I need to be able to look at this and say, oh, I know what this is telling me. This tells me nothing. If you flip to the next one, now I have 3 new levels. What they are, no idea. And again, it's just, if we're gonna get this information beforehand, and I'm gonna try and comprehend it, I need to know what it means. When does this take effect?
Right now, the plan for go-forward date is April 17th.
April 17th, so that's 2 weeks from today.
Sir.
Was there any reason why we're finding out about this 2 weeks prior to it happening?
Sir, we've been talking about response configuration for many months. We did have a meeting scheduled with you, I believe, back in early March that we unfortunately had to cancel and reschedule. So that's the only reason why it's as late in the process that we're meeting with you here today.
Okay. Yeah, just take the feedback. Someone should be able to look at this and understand exactly what it means.
I understand.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Partee.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I am a retired police officer, investigator, Nassau County Police Department. Coming out of the academy, we were given EMT certification. The reason for that, because the diagram or the business model for Nassau County Police Department in Long Island was that whenever a 911 call went into the call center, and it was in my sector, 110 precinct, the first precinct, 110 sector, the call would immediately go out to myself as the RMP driver, police driver, to respond immediately to that call. While another call went out to the ambulance, which is stationed at our station house. That model in itself is very important because now I'm getting anxiety because the amount of calls that I responded when it's a child not breathing, when it's an unconscious person, when it's an arterial bleeding, the people that are calling that 911 model, can you put that model back up again? The model that goes through your call center and then you have all this assessment? Yeah, this model right there. When the person's on the phone calling 911 and it's a medical emergency and their particular loved one is in distress, they're not sitting there waiting for somebody to go through an assessment. They're yelling into the phone, I need somebody right away, my child is not breathing, we want somebody here. And when I get to that response, when I arrive at that scene and I see that person that's bleeding profusely, I'm trained to immediately provide triage. And also, my partner or the next vehicle or the next car they're responding also, because they hear the call and they're not in service, we're providing triage to that particular person, and we're telling the ambulance forthwith, immediately, forthwith, on any calls. Now, up here in Huntersville, exactly on your 4 to 12s, on your 8 to 4s, 4 to 12s, at midnight to 8s. How many buses are in the David Davison, Cornelius, and Huntersville area, medic buses specifically?
Sure. To answer the last specific question, it varies by day and it varies by hour of the day. And it's built by demand. So we look every day and we go back and look at a 20-week worth of demand and we create our schedule that way. It might actually be beneficial, John, if you help a little bit with that answer, because John oversees our comm center and our operations division, and so he might be able to explain that a little bit better. And also, what I want, John, if you would address too, is how when a person calls in a case of emergency, they don't have to go through 3 minutes of interrogation before we decide we're going to send an ambulance. When we find out that there's a life-threatening emergency, it's done right away. And so, if you don't mind unpacking both of those a little bit.
Yeah, a couple of things, and thanks for your experience in service as an officer. We do appreciate that. In Mecklenburg County, police departments are not automatically dispatched on every 911 call where it is a medical call. And so it's a very different model in Mecklenburg County. So we do not have police officers en route unless the nature of the call indicates that there may also be a police issue. So it's a little bit of a differentiator there. The purpose of the MPDS protocol is to fast track the highest acuity patients, so those that have difficulty breathing or chest pain or high acuity hemorrhage, to very quick assessment and then dedication of response. And so the protocol is built to ask the fewest and most important questions first, And then as we question whether or not the patient has a high probability of a very bad illness or injury, we ask more questions to try to figure out what is going on. So the protocol is built to get a rapid assessment and then a rapid dispatch for those high acuity patients. And then as for our staffing model within Mecklenburg County, we staff using what we call, and this is going to be some technical details, so pardon my technical language for a minute, but we staff using what we call dynamic deployment. And so dynamic deployment means we look at the community as a whole, and we base where we position ambulances on, like JP said, past 20 weeks worth of call volume, so demand first and then geography. And so we look at what is the likelihood that a high acuity call is going to occur in any one particular area of Mecklenburg County, and we make sure we have ambulances in those areas. Then we look at what is the geography we are covering, and we make sure that we cover our geography there. At any one point in time during the midday, so let's talk about now, 4 o'clock to now till maybe 7 o'clock in the afternoon, Medic will deploy around 45 ambulances within Mecklenburg County, all 520 odd square miles of it. At night, depending on day of week, that number could drop down to 25 to 23. Our goal is to make sure we cover demand first and then geography. So there is not an ambulance dedicated to the town of Huntersville or the town of Cornelius or the town of Davidson, just like there's not an ambulance dedicated to the center of Charlotte or South Charlotte or Pineville. But what we do is we manage your volume so that we have rapid responses to those people who need rapid responses. Now, we do have posts here in Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davidson, and because of the challenge of the geography on the north end of the community, one of our dispatchers' consistent priorities is always to push ambulances north. Because we know once an ambulance runs a call in the north end, it'll be between 45 and 50 minutes until they're likely available once they leave the scene, is there's just not the hospital or healthcare infrastructure up here on the north end. You have one hospital-based emergency department, and then you have a freestanding emergency department, which doesn't admit patients. And so if there's a serious illness or injury, we have to go downtown. And so it's a constant loop of replacing ambulances to make sure that we have coverage up here. So it's a very difficult question to answer. I thank you for raising it. And the way we manage our system is by deploying ambulances throughout the community based on demand and geography. And we do focus, because it is important, as is all of the community, to make sure, specifically in the harder geography that we have up north, that we're always pushing ambulances up here for our next call.
I have 5 more questions. What are the 3 on-scene arrival times the town of Huntersville could face with priority 1, 2, and 3 responses?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one? I didn't hear the beginning of the question.
What are the 3 on-scene arrival times the town of Huntersville could face with a priority 1, 2, and 3 responses?
So the maximum response time would be 10 minutes and 59 seconds for priority 1, 15 minutes for priority 2, and 30 minutes for priority 3. That's the maximum response time. Well, that's the target response time. You'll see in that middle column a note that we didn't talk about is our response time reliability. We can't be perfect. We can't be on scene on time all of the time. And so we have a reliability measure there at 90% for our priority 1 calls, 90% for our priority 2 calls, and 80% for our priority 3. As Dr. Swanson mentioned, with our 60-minute response experience today, we note that we're very often not at the edge of that 60-minute response and more on average within the 30s. And so I wouldn't look at these as this is when the ambulance will get here, but this is our target. We must exceed these targets, and that is our job to make sure we do that. Sometimes, based on the amount of call volume occurring in the city or the county, sometimes based on our staffing, we may be challenged to meet those response time targets, but it's our job to manage towards them.
Can you define System 0 and how often this happens to Medic?
So a common nomenclature within the industry is called System Status Level 0. Right? So we measure our system status level as the number of ambulances that are currently available to respond to a call. Right? And so you may have a period of time where we have a system status level of 13 or 14 out of 45 built ambulances, so the majority of them are on a call and we have 13 available. A system status level 0 is an event that occurs sporadically throughout the system in which all ambulances that are rostered and on service are all on a call. And so there are no ambulances available to take the next call. The periods of these is very transient, usually lasting minutes, not hours, or even double digits of minutes. We track these events. We review them each day to see how our system status performed, whether or not we hit 0 in that day. I can't provide you off the top of my head the amount of time in between system status zeros today, and I'd be happy to communicate that with you in a different manner.
Well, when you reach that, if you reach that status, or when you reach that status, who's dispatched in place of Medic?
So we have mutual aid with the counties that surround us, and our communications supervisor and our controller collaborate together to determine what's the best method to dispatch the next ambulance. So if you're at system status 0, no ambulance is available, and I have a call on the board that's a 60-minute response, I might not dispatch any ambulance because one will likely become available that can manage that call, and we'll wait. We might call for mutual aid, or we might know that there are four ambulances that have been at CMC Main for about an hour, and they're going to clear, or we'll call them and ask them to clear, and we'll dispatch that unit. And so it's dynamic, and so that choice is fluid, and they use the resources they have available, either mutual aid, moving ambulances out of an unavailable status at the hospital to an available status, and managing our low acuity response priorities to hold calls that are appropriate low acuity until resources become available.
Now, is all the data that we're seeing today gathered just for the North Mecklenburg towns?
So these data don't represent any actual performance. These data represent what our targets will be in the future, and our targets will be these 4, North Mecklenburg, Central Mecklenburg, and South Mecklenburg. But there are no actual performance data that is being presented at the moment. I've got a commissioner pointing at a slide that is a generalized Mecklenburg County data, the PowerPoint or the pie charts about lights and sirens usage. The data that Dr. Swanson presented is all entire county, not just the north end.
Can Medic handle all the calls without the assistance of the fire departments up here in North Mecklenburg?
Like when I started out the presentation about 911 callers, I discussed the fact that we used a tiered system and a tiered approach where we use first responders who are in their community to respond first.
Right, I remember, yeah.
Medic to respond second and manage the transport. We believe that first responder fire departments are vital to managing how we respond to emergencies within our community and appreciate the partnerships that our fire departments have provided to us over the years by being good medical first responders.
All right, my last question. What is Medic's assumption to the impact that this will put on the Huntersville Fire Department, keeping the same level of service for fire? What will be the impact of our fire department? As you know, we're now in the process of trying to evaluate going full-time instead of part-time.
Yeah, certainly. So it's a great question. There's a lot of pieces to consider that, with that. One piece is that we are estimating with these changes, as John mentioned earlier, there are some calls that the fire department is not going to go on. We anticipate there being an increase of calls that the fire department does not respond to by about 5 to 10%. It just kind of is going to vary depending on the department and the call volume. So they will see a reduction in the number of calls that they do. The reason for that, as John mentioned earlier, is because we want to make sure that when we send our fire departments out to calls, that they are responding to calls where they can truly make a difference. And if it's a call that we don't think that there's a potential life-saving intervention or that the fire department maybe can't actually or need to be on, let's keep them available for another higher priority call or a fire or something else that comes in. So with that, that's one piece of it. As I mentioned, there is going to be, and as you can see, some increase in ambulance response times. Also, as John mentioned, that we are going to be dispatched simultaneously. So fire will be dispatched when medic is dispatched. So that means that in the scenario, as John was talking about, if we're level 0 and a 60-minute call comes in, we might hold that call for 10 minutes until there's an ambulance available to respond, and we won't dispatch the fire department either until we're ready to respond to the ambulance. That way the fire department isn't going to be sitting as long waiting on scene, waiting for medic. So we believe the impact is going to be minimal. In addition to that, there is also protocol in place that our medical director created that will allow the fire departments in certain situations to, after they've done a full assessment with the patient and determined that they're a low acuity patient, and that the fire department is not going to be able to provide any type of medical care or doesn't need to, that the firefighters can actually go available on scene and be able to respond to another emergency call should it come in. So if a cardiac arrest comes in down the street, that unit could go available and respond to that call. And then the patient would wait until medic arrived on scene. And there's a specific protocol, and it's all set up to be as safe as absolutely possible with that. And the fire departments have that option as well. So some of this, of course, though, in full transparency, is once we get this up and running, we are going to have to measure this, and we're going to have to see what that impact is in reality. And we've committed to our fire department fire chiefs that we will communicate with them on a monthly basis as we get this up and running so that we can hear feedback from them, we can share data, and we can look at this and make sure there's not an adverse impact. And if there is, we have the ability to pivot if we need to and make adjustments. And we just will have to determine what those adjustments will be at that time, and we'll, just as we work collaboratively with them to get to this point, we'll continue to do so as we roll this out.
Thank you, but I would suggest, just as a point of reference of how I responded, that you consider injecting the police department into that formula somewhere so that it can release the burden on fire department, and maybe they can share the responsibility. But I think it's very important. Minutes and seconds is very important when it comes to a medical emergency. And to reduce that factor, I would implore you to look in both models. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Kidwell, do you have any questions? I'm just going to go down the line. Commissioner Kovacs?
So I heard you guys talking about lights and sirens being unsafe for you all, and wanting to decrease the amount of times you have to use lights and sirens. Is it when the fire department is responding, are they responding with lights and sirens?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. So in the current response configuration, our fire department partners are responding lights and sirens 99% of the time. And this proposal reduces their lights and sirens responses from 99% to about 49%. Now, we don't have the authority to dictate to your fire department whether they respond emergency or non-emergency, but we are strongly suggesting that, and we believe that we have the support from the majority, if not all of the chiefs in the county in reducing lights and sirens responses for the fire departments as well. One thing that is important to note that I don't think has been mentioned yet tonight is that on these calls where we are now going to be responding non-emergency, both the paramedic crew chief at medic and the fire department captain or lieutenant, whoever the officer is on the engine, will have the ability to see call notes. And if they see something in those call notes that they feel has a clinically appropriate reason to upgrade a response, they can upgrade their response from non-emergency to emergency. And so that is a discretionary piece that we are putting in there for those 15-minute responses to make sure that we do everything we can to get it right.
So just for the common resident, what can a firefighter actually do medically?
Medically on scene, I'll defer that to Dr. Swanson.
Sure, thank you. So the scope of practice, as we call it, for each level of provider in North Carolina is set by the North Carolina Medical Board. That includes emergency medical responders, which we really don't have in this community, EMTs, and paramedics. That scope is set by the North Carolina Medical Board. They tell us what each level provider can and cannot do. Here locally, we have essentially maxed out what EMTs, so whether you're an EMT for medic or an EMT for one of the fire departments, is permitted by North Carolina to do. So that includes things like utilizing an automated defibrillator if somebody's in cardiac arrest, managing an airway with an adjunct airway device, providing epinephrine for someone in anaphylaxis, providing albuterol for people with respiratory illness and difficulty breathing, providing aspirin for patients with chest pain, and providing a detailed patient assessment. The true life-saving interventions, most of the potential life-saving interventions are BLS or EMT skills. The paramedic brings a lot of additional clinical acumen, and they can bring some additional pain relief medications that aren't available at the EMT level, some additional critical care medicines that are not available at the EMT level. But for the true definitive life-saving stuff, again, cardiac arrest, CPR, and automated defibrillator being the two biggest things you can provide, those are provided at the EMT level. Somebody with severe difficulty breathing, whether it's from asthma or emphysema or an allergic reaction, all those medications can be provided at the EMT level as well. An opioid overdose in this unfortunate current times we're in, EMTs can provide naloxone. To part of your questions before, Commissioner, I have worked with a number of the town police departments. We have police-administered naloxone programs in place throughout the county. A number of the police departments will, even though the call gets transferred to us for the medical call, they will listen in. A number of the town departments all carry AEDs in the back of their squad cars, will respond to cardiac arrest, essentially a self-dispatch if they hear a cardiac arrest, and begin CPR and AED if they happen to beat the fire department or the ambulance there.
So in that 10:59, 15, 30-minute response time, are fire departments going to get there first? And then in all three of those categories, for the majority of the time, they're going to be there while waiting on you all? So that truck is out of
Yeah,
commission?
so globally, right now, the fire departments arrive before the ambulance about 70% of the time. I don't see that that'll change significantly. That means 30% of the time, the ambulance is the first provider there. Again, it just depends on where the call is and what the locations to all the responding units are. With simultaneous dispatch throughout, we don't anticipate that there's going to be a significant increase in time that a first responder would be there prior to ambulance arrival. And as JP mentioned, the protocol to allow them to become available, we also have a protocol in place for them to, upon patient assessment, if they feel they need to have the ambulance step from non-emergency response to emergency response, they communicate with that information to the responding ambulance or to our communication center, and they will upgrade that response.
Okay, and is this, after all those numbers, is this due to a staffing issue as opposed to the amount of calls? I mean, Because we're experiencing it all over.
Yeah, so staffing definitely plays a part, but this is not in itself due to a staffing issue. So if we're not fully staffed, it doesn't matter what response configuration medic does. We're going to struggle with response times. We're going to struggle with level 0. We're going to struggle with meeting the demands of the system. This is an evolution of this EMS system that's actually started about 10 years ago and has been slowly progressing and has been accelerated by the pandemic.
I have to tell you, I'm really worried about what the burden this puts on our fire department and how that's gonna affect our staffing. Because this is a lot, I think. And it's like my fellow commissioner said, it stinks that we're just hearing, we were supposed to hear about this sooner, but we are hearing about it 2 weeks before it goes into effect without having a say in the matter anyway. I'm done.
Commissioner Phillips?
I mean, we don't really have a say in this at all. I echo the same sentiments that it's our budget season, and had we known this a little bit sooner, we would know how to better prioritize for our fire department and their future ask. But I will throw the request out there that maybe in a month or two, our fire chief gives us an update to let us know how this is going for them so that we can be more supportive, because unfortunately, Mecklenburg County things seem to be Charlotte-based, and then we all feel the trickle down, and not all, Mecklenburg County's not one size fits all. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys going through the gauntlet, though. I know that we're not an easy crowd.
It's okay. Appreciate your feedback.
And I do have several questions, so
ma'am.
I apologize that we're not closer to the end. One of my questions as I was looking through the packet was, how many trucks are currently in service? How many ambulances do we run currently?
So I believe the number is 72. Is that right, Jeff? 72? Thank you. 72 ambulances.
And how many, or rather, what did that look like, let's say, 20 years ago?
Well, that's a great question. It was probably half or less than that. Our call volume over the last 20 years has skyrocketed here in Mecklenburg County, along with the population.
And do you take trucks out of service to transport, i.e. these behavioral health calls?
So if you're referring to non-emergency.
Moving from one hospital to another, et
So
cetera?
it's not necessarily taking ambulances out of service. We do have what we call non-emergency trucks, BLS non-emergency trucks, that is their dedicated service for the day, is to do those non-emergency BLS non-911 calls. In the event that there is a higher level of non-emergency calls than there are BLS units available, we can use our other units if they're available, but 911 always has the priority. So unfortunately, in that scenario, the people that have to wait are the people waiting for the non-emergency transport, because the 911 system is going to trump that every time.
So are these non-emergency trucks the same trucks that are used to transport individuals from one hospital to another?
We have a unified fleet, so all of our trucks are the same. All of them are outfitted the same, and they can be multi-purpose.
Okay, so, and that's the 72 total?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sorry, I kind of wrote my notes all over the place here. The OC calls, I mean, my understanding, those are the behavioral health crisis calls, is that correct?
Yeah, so OC is an acronym for crisis nurse or a crisis line. So those are behavioral health emergencies that are low acuity that we think a conversation with a crisis counselor on the phone will manage the issue.
So those are not, you don't dispatch first responders out for those calls?
Do not dispatch first responders, and we also do not dispatch an ambulance if the crisis nurse or crisis provider is able to de-escalate the situation, which they do a great job of, actually. The crisis line has been a fantastic ad for folks that have crisis that aren't to the level of a need of an inpatient at a behavioral health center.
Okay. And the first responder only, are those like car crashes, those types of?
They're mostly today car crashes, very minor like assaults, where if a patient, was in an argument and the police call and say, oh, we've got 2 patients that have been in an argument, someone's been assaulted, and they have a very small abrasion on their arm or their finger. They don't require medical attention at a hospital emergency department, issues like that.
So for the new proposed configuration, the first responder only, that still is car crashes, et cetera?
It's car crashes, et cetera. There are some codes in there that are more appropriate to be managed by first responders first. So we have some codes that are, let me think in my mind and get a good example, like a hazardous material response, where we're going to want the first responders to hold their role as a fire department and manage the hazardous material incident and make the scene safe before you would want to send an ambulance, because maybe there aren't patients, maybe there really just is a hazardous material response. Sometimes there will be a patient, they can ask for an ambulance and obviously will come out. There are many kind of hazard type situations that we would want to send a first responder first and a first responder on their own, because there are very, very low likelihood that there will be patients there. And they're going to do their kind of all hazards preparedness work on those calls anyways, which is, I think, very appropriate.
Can we go back to one of the first slides, and it was the slide right there. So in looking at your graph, you've got 76% dispatched as life-threatening, the top graph, and then 24% dispatched as non-life-threatening. Is that the configuration of response today?
Today, yes, ma'am.
So my question then is, in regards to training for our dispatch, why is there such a, I guess I'm a little bit surprised that so much is being dispatched as life-threatening when there should be a way to identify that through the 911 process or through the dispatch process. And I don't know if it's a lack of training. I'm trying to understand the graph.
No, this is the protocol that we're here to change. It's not the dispatchers, it's not the training. They're doing exactly what they're trained to do. They're following the exact protocol that they are trained to follow. The way that our response protocols are written and the way that our contract currently is with the county is that both those priority 1 and 2 responses, which as you saw is 75-ish% of all of our calls, receive a lights and sirens response regardless. If they fall into those one of those 2 categories, it's just automatic lights and sirens, and that's what we need to change, because it just doesn't make sense for us to continue to operate that way when we know we have the people who have the training and who have better protocols to be able to do it smarter and safer.
One of the concerns I think that I echo with this board is really with our fire department responding and then being left sitting with calls, waiting for a response from medic to show. And especially if they're getting other calls, fire calls, additional car accidents, et cetera, that they need to go to. I think that the burden, on our fire department is probably our biggest concern up here.
I want you to know that we hear that. We've heard that from your fire chief. We've heard that from a multitude of councils. And that is why, we talked about it the way that we talked about it already a little bit, with considering the reduction of the number of calls the fire department's going to go to overall, their ability to be able to go available on scene if they need to, and it's appropriate to do that. And with simultaneous dispatch, instead of sending the fire department out all the way or right away and then sitting waiting for medic, if we go out simultaneously, that should reduce that. And again, we are going to follow up with our fire department partners every month on that. And if it turns out to be something different that we don't anticipate it's going to be, and it does turn out to be burdensome from them, again, we have the ability to pivot. We just need to identify what the best way to pivot will be, and we'll do that collaboratively with your chief and with the other chiefs in the county.
And I appreciate that. I think that when you're talking about, let's just go to those 60-minute response time calls. I mean, what type of call would that look like?
Sure. So I don't know if John or Dr. Swanson wants to cover that, and I don't, yeah, go ahead.
So those 60-minute calls are very minor illnesses, very minor injuries, and they do not have a first responder response with them. They don't today, they won't when we reconfigure
So we're
this
not
as well.
talking about somebody who thinks they're having chest pain.
No, 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 no. No, this is somebody with a runny nose, somebody with a rash, an abrasion, a small wound, something that's very low mechanism, low concern for significant medical illness, no priority symptoms, meaning this, it's not having chest pain, is not having altered mental status, not having difficulty breathing. Those are all up in the top range. This 60-minute is, having gone through all the questions, deem this to be a very low priority. We'll send an ambulance. We do not send a first responder on those because we also know from looking at the past data, there's very, very little need for a first responder to provide any sort of treatment or assessment before an ambulance arrives.
Okay.
Just say one thing with that too, just to add really quick. So we're the safety net for people who don't have anywhere else to turn. And you might be surprised at just how many of these very low acuity calls Medic gets. And we need to be there, and we will be there for those patients. But we need to be a little bit smarter about how we utilize our resources in response to those patients. And that's part of what this is about.
Okay. I think one of the things that this board is going to have to continue to look at, just looking at the numbers in the budget, I think that we're looking at 58,000 short in the cost to run these calls, and that number has the potential to go up. And so I want the board to be aware of it, especially as we're going into budget season, that we may be looking at a significant amount of money in regards to making sure that they have the things that they need to run these calls. And I mean, you're talking, medical supplies, the trucks, the fuel, et cetera, to run those calls, especially if they're going to be sitting there. So it's something that we have to take into consideration. Any other questions for JP at this point? Commissioner Munger?
Yeah, sorry about that. And you may not have the answer right off the top of your head, but do you know how your response time compares to other major metro areas currently and based on the proposed model?
Yeah. Are you talking about current priority one response times, or are you talking kind of the
Your entire grid?
entire grid? So as far as our performance today, I would put our performance on priority one response times up against anyone. Our average in the county right now is 8 minutes and 23 seconds. And as far as our new response configuration, we are not going to be the first who's making changes like this, but we are one of the first. So it's hard for me to answer that question.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I do want to thank you for your time and thank you for coming up and sharing this with us. We will be looking forward to hearing back as you make this transition, and I'm guarantee you we'll be working with Chief DeToli, making sure that our response and what our citizens need, that they're being taken care of.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to meet you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you all for being so patient. I know that was about an hour-long presentation, but it's one that's very important to our residents. Before we move into public comment, I do have a proclamation this evening. Whereas the basis for continuity of any society is education, and in the great state of North Carolina, the education of our youth is a priority. And whereas in order to achieve its highest goals, education must not only impart knowledge, but also teach the students how to live forming and strengthening their moral character to make a better life for themselves as individuals and for society as a whole, imparting moral and ethical values that have been the bedrock of society since the dawn of civilization. And whereas a global spiritual leader and leading advocate for the advancement of education, and I hope I don't mess the name up, the Rebbe, Rabbi Mechem and M. I'm terrible with names, Schneerson of righteous memories, stressed that a moral and ethical education empowers every individual to develop their full potential in making the world a better place. And whereas such an education can nurture the unity of diverse peoples through encouraging increased acts of goodness and kindness, with the awareness that even a single positive act of an individual can change the world and usher in an era of global peace, when there will be peace within your walls, serenity within your mansions. And that's from Psalms 122. And whereas Education and Sharing Day is observed each year on the Rebbe's birthday in recognition of his outstanding and lasting contributions toward the improvement of education, morality, and acts of charity around the world, a day to pause and reflect on our responsibility to ensure our youth have the foundation necessary to lead lives rich in purpose and fulfillment through service and good works. And whereas April the 2nd of 2023 will mark 121 years since the Rebbe's birth, capping a year in which thousands of new institutions and initiatives were launched throughout the world in tribute to this celebration. And whereas this year has an added significance as a year of Hakel, a biblical event of unity, education, and spiritual growth, emphasizing how every person is crucial to perfecting the world. Now, therefore, I, Melinda Bales, Mayor of the Town of Huntersville, do hereby proclaim Sunday, April the 2nd of April 2023 to be Education and Sharing Day in the Town of Huntersville. I know that was yesterday, and we were not able to get this done at our last board meeting. But we've done this last year and the year before, and I wanted to make sure that we honored that again this year. So thank you for allowing me that opportunity to provide this proclamation. We'll now move into public comments, and the first person who has signed up to speak is Gatewood Campbell. Oh, yes, you are. It might be good if I put the glasses back on. All right, so it looks like everyone who has signed up to speak is during that public hearing, so we will hold off on that. Thank you. We'll now move to agenda changes. Are there any agenda changes this evening?
Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Kidwell.
Yeah, I would like to move 8E off the consent agenda to 10I of regular business.
8E to 10I. Is there a second?
Don't believe you need a second to move something off the agenda.
Is there a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
Motion. Second.
You want a second? Did not get a second. To change the agenda, no. It does require a second. I thought it did. Okay. All right, so there is a motion and there is a second to change the agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries 3-2. We will move item 8E to 10I. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
Motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda? Motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Munger. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Now move to our first public hearing, 9A. This is to conduct a public hearing on petition R22-07. This is the Town One Mixed Use Center, a request by Tree Nail Development. Mr. James, are you here?
Can I make a motion?
You're more than welcome to make a motion.
I'm going to save him some legwork there. Motion to continue public hearing on petition R22-07 to Monday, May 1st, 2023, 6 p.m. at Huntersville Town Hall.
Second.
There's a motion, there is a second to continue this public hearing. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. We'll now move to item 9B, conduct a public hearing on petition TA 23-02. This is a request by the Town of Huntersville Planning Department for a text amendment to the zoning ordinance. And this is Ms. Spite. How are you this evening? It's been a minute. It's good to see you.
See you all, thank you. So Lauren Spate for the Town Planning Department. I'd like to enter the staff report into the record. TA 23-02 is amendment of multiple parts, so just stay with me. Sure. Would you like me to repeat?
Yes, please.
Okay. Lauren Spate for the Town Planning Department for TA 23-02. It's a text amendment of multiple parts to the zoning and subdivision ordinances. Sections 1 and 2 are regarding regulations for the traffic impact analysis, or TIA requirements. Please note, there are no changes to existing thresholds for improvements. Section 1 is regarding a TIA reference that is no longer applicable in the zoning ordinance. See if I can. I'll just read it. So, a few sentences down, it reads, "The draft TIA shall be submitted to town staff 30 days prior to the town board public hearing for rezoning cases or as provided in the subdivision ordinance." That section is a holdover from when the sketch plan review was quasi-judicial. It is now administratively reviewed. So there is no reference in the subdivision ordinance. It is now just in the zoning ordinance, that requirement. The next section for resubmittals of TIAs, it is only specific to rezoning cases because rezoning cases would be the only plan that would be coming to the town board now for new subdivisions specifically. Section 2 is also regarding a TIA reference that is no longer applicable. This subsection is within the sketch plan requirements of the subdivision ordinance. This was specified by the planning director. Subsection 2 indicates that for developments of 20 or more residential units or equivalent traffic generation, a physical analysis is required. The thresholds are already set in Article 14. This is not removing the requirement. A development of 20 units or more would still have to submit a TIA determination of need, and if it hit any thresholds for improvements, they would still be required. Section 3 is regarding the withdrawal of amendments such as text amendments and map amendments or rezonings. This proposed change is for Article 11.4.4 of the zoning ordinance. The ordinance currently allows for the withdrawal of petitions at any time up to the date of the public hearing on the petition. The revision indicates that the withdrawal can take place at any time prior to final action by the town board. Section 4 is regarding the withdrawal of petitions specifically for the reclassification of property, which are rezoning petitions. So it indicates that if, for example, a petition for the reclassification of property was withdrawn, the petitioner would have to wait a year before resubmitting unless they met one of the criterion in subsection 2. Sections 5 and 6 are both regarding mailing requirements for community meetings. Section 5 includes proposed changes to mailing requirements for community meetings for sketch plans for major subdivisions. And Section 6 includes proposed changes to mailing requirements for the required community meeting held by petitioners for rezonings. Both Sections 5 and 6 change the mailing requirement that the community meetings must be sent via certified mail. That is all that I have. I'll take any questions this time.
Is there a motion?
Public hearing.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right. It is a public hearing. I apologize. You'll have a headache. Questions? Commissioner Kidwell.
Yes, thank you very much. With the TIA, what is the current threshold that was required, and what was it previously?
Let me see.
Mr. Trott?
So we're not proposing any changes to the thresholds.
I know, I'm just
Yes,
curious.
But, okay.
Good evening. I'm sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
What is our current threshold with the TIA, and what was it prior?
The current thresholds, there's several. So it's 1,500 daily trips or 150 peak hour trips. The prior threshold was 1,000 daily trips and 100 peak hour. The new, or I guess the current ordinance also gives the option that the town can defer the TIA to NCDOT if NCDOT is requiring
Okay,
TIA.
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will close that public hearing. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing on petition TA 22-11. This is a request by the Huntersville Planning Department for a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to amend Article 10. And you're staying with us.
I am. So I'd like to enter the staff report into the record for TA 22-11. The purpose of this text amendment is to increase flexibility of sign regulations based on customer feedback and to clarify and codify current practices. I'm only going to review the major changes of this amendment, but please let me know if you have any questions about other items that are within this proposed text amendment. The most extensive changes are to Article 10.7.1, which has the standards for our permanent on-premise signs. And the most notable change in this section is regarding the sign on the parking lot facades of buildings. So today, if you have a building that fronts a public street, which all are required to front a public street or have alternative frontage, you're allowed a percentage of the wall facade that fronts the public street for your primary sign. To have a sign on another wall of the building, it has to be facing a parking lot and to have pedestrian entry. And then if you want to have a sign on that side, which is illustrated with the pink strip, it can be up to 32 square feet, but it must be a transfer from the amount that you're allowed on the primary side. So if you are, for example, in this illustration, so here you would have to get 10% of the wall side on the green side, and you get that up to 128 square feet, and then you can transfer up to 32 square feet to the opposite side. What we are proposing is that the calculation for the primary facade stay the same, but parking lot signs are allowed to just have 32 square feet outright. This is from customer feedback that staff has been receiving for a number of years, wherein many businesses don't have enough sign area to transfer, or there are multi-tenant buildings that have a small amount of wall area to start with, and then they don't have a sign on the parking lot side, which is where most people enter a lot of multi-tenant buildings. Along the same vein, I'm not going to read that paragraph. I will explain what this change is for. So staff have received a lot of feedback as well regarding multi-tenant, multi-level buildings. So in many cases, staff is receiving feedback that a tenant will sign a contract to lease a unit or multiple units in a multi-tenant, multi-story building. And as a part of their contract, they are promised a sign on the primary facade of the building. But when they go to submit sign permits, we see that the existing signs are using the maximum area for the allowable wall signs. So our proposed change is that when we have new multi-tenant, multi-level buildings or their site plan revisions, that staff will require a plan to be administratively reviewed to ensure that all tenants are able to get signage for identification purposes. I'm not reading all of this either. So there are two options that developments have if they would like some additional flexibility beyond what the zoning ordinance already allows for signage. And there are development area requirements, so there's a minimum acreage requirement that you have to meet to be allowed these options. One is a special sign district, which we have only a handful of, and then another is the planned development sign, which we actually have quite a few of, which just allows a larger monument sign, and in the case of special sign districts, it's up to the town board's discretion to grant whatever the development is proposing. The most notable changes here are that for the planned development option, which is administratively approved by staff, we're proposing to allow a 40 square foot sign on one non-street fronting wall for the development. Lastly, staff have received numerous requests for drive-up signs. And this was, I guess, kind of started with a proposal for an incredibly large canopy drive-up sign that was pretty much the dimensions of a gas station canopy in one of the developments. So we took to kind of evaluating how to appropriately allow these types of signs. And the proposal within this text amendment is that signs like drive-up or curbside pickup signs would be restricted to be similar to what is currently required for handicap signs. And lastly, there is an additional category that's proposed for temporary sporting events. Staff has also received feedback that the various sporting events that are held in the town would like to have temporary signs. Right now, flashing banners and things like that are not allowed because of the distraction that it could cause, traffic issues that can cause, safety concerns most importantly. However, we are proposing that a stationary sign be allowed for temporary sporting events for that take place in the parks, greenways in the town. And that is it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Commissioner Phillips?
So the one thing, I'm glad that you guys are really doing this, but the one that kind of stood out to me was the last one you just spoke about with the sports. How come that wasn't considered maybe just to say public events? Because like when we have like Angels in 97, like the Highland Games, things like that, those are temporary moments. So I don't know why they're not being treated in a similar fashion because they're an event to the public, like similar to a sports event.
Yep, public interest events are already.
Okay.
Yep.
I was asked to ask that one, so thanks.
Any other questions? Commissioner Munger?
Sure. And again, on the sporting event or other event signs, is there a specific time frame? Like, can they put it up a week leading into the event, or are they supposed to take it down when the event ends? Just trying to get that.
Sure, so they should be up no sooner than the day of the event and may be allowed through the duration of the event. It's subsection D.
I just read D. Thanks. And if you go back, to the Target looking thing? Yeah. Well, I'm just curious, what was our overall objection to that?
So this was hotly debated among staff. So one thing that we wanted to consider is that most people are already familiar with the drive-up signs and where they're going to be located. If you're not, you know to look for them already. It's not something that's new that anyone's doing, especially since the pandemic. Most places have a curbside or a drive-up pickup option. And Targets as well is very familiar. So the idea is that we didn't want these to be overwhelming. Another consideration is that when the signs get to a certain dimension, they may require a building permit. And right now, we do not have a category that would fit in, other than it being a monument sign. And there is no monument sign type that a drive-up sign would fit within, which was the situation we got into with the canopy that was previously proposed. So we tried to find a way that someone could have a drive-up sign without having to get a building permit or a sign permit. So this would be a sign that would be allowed similarly to directional signs that are already required without having to have a permit.
I may be on my own here, but I wouldn't mind seeing some options around this when it comes to a vote, because that doesn't bother me.
It's currently a separate section, so you're welcome to exclude this.
Commissioner Kovacs?
I was actually going to say the same thing. Well, similar. I like the differentiation, but because as someone that does utilize handicap parking sometimes, I have been known to start to pull in and go, oh, it's drive up. So I actually like the differentiation. So I would like to see some options as well.
Are there any questions from planning board members? No? Okay. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll close that public hearing. Thank you. We will now move to item 9D. Conduct public hearing to receive public comments on the 2023 Downtown Master Plan. Mr. Semino.
Thank you, Mayor. So the draft plan was accepted unanimously by the Downtown Plan Steering Committee December 15, 2022. The minutes from that meeting are in your agenda packet. In addition to that, the Planning Board on February the 28th, 2023 unanimously recommended approval. Again, the minutes from that meeting is in your agenda packet. The Downtown Plan Steering Committee, 15 members who volunteered their time for over a year, 15 meetings. They really, really worked hard and struggled at times, a lot of conflict, what direction we want to go. In the end, they came together unanimously, which is a testament to the hard work that they all have put in, so we are very thankful for those 15 members. We also had 7 ex officio members. The consultant group was Shook Kelly. They also had a subcontractor for Gannett Fleming on the infrastructure planning and traffic analysis, as well as the Gibbs Planning Group for the market analysis. This is an overall of the master plan that was in the agenda packet. And then online, again, the committee had 3 public forums. We looked at different high, medium, and low intensities. In the end, the consensus was the plan that you see before you tonight. This shows the overall master plan. The town board did ask for the committee to really concentrate on that quarter mile in the downtown, so that's the area where we primarily focused. Basically keeping 3 to 4 story buildings, and then as the buildings are, as you move further out, lower intensity as they get to some of the existing neighborhoods. That's a real quick synopsis. In addition to the master plan, the consultants also provided a conceptual plan of how the buildings might look and how the parking might work on the property, and outlined a number of key catalytic projects that the plan had indicated could be helpful in jumpstarting the development and redevelopment of downtown. The committee, from the very start, wanted to see a plan that was action-oriented. And so this is just a chart that has, of one of several charts, that has actions and when those actions are supposed to be taken. So again, there's a lot of focus on implementation, and you will see, and you have already seen and heard about in your budget upcoming things that we have put in the budget per the draft plan. So with that, Mayor, I am finished giving an overview and happy to answer any questions. And with that, I'll just turn it over to you.
Okay. Any questions at this point for Mr. Semino? We will. I'm just, go ahead.
So I was just curious, the thought process behind, how does adding in, are these roundabouts? Right,
There are some, if it looks like, yes, they are.
Does that help downtown?
It slows the traffic down. It gives people multiple options.
In a neighborhood?
Oh, I'm sorry, in the,
Greenfield Park?
oh, the blue dots, those are not roundabouts.
They're
those are
green
not.
dots surrounded by blue. Oh my God.
Let me see if I can,
Behind North State.
There you go. Right there.
right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Cool face.
Those would not be roundabouts. Those would not be roundabouts. Those are just street intersections.
Just intersection.
Just street intersections, yes.
Any other questions? Is everyone ready for public comment now? All right. Ms. Campbell. And as you come, remember you have 3 minutes, and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Gatewood Campbell, and I live at 104 Interlaken Place here in Huntersville. Mayor and Commissioners, I'm here today to encourage you to vote yes to the final draft of the Downtown Master Plan. I was one of the 15 voting members on the Downtown Plan Steering Committee, and although we started out light years away from each other, we came together and voted unanimously to approve this plan and send it to you for vote. This process was not an easy one, but the voting members and ex officios were deeply committed to coming up with a solid plan to add new life and excitement to our downtown. Over the course of 13 months, we met 15 times. That's 30 hours of meetings and discussions, and that doesn't include the research and homework done to prepare for the meetings. Additionally, we had 3 public forums throughout the process for a total of 18 meetings. As you review the plans, please take into full consideration the details done prior to tonight's public hearing. I assure you, we did our due diligence on this project, and we are proud of the final product. I encourage you to trust the process and approve the final draft master plan. I want to thank Chairperson Sarah McCauley and Vice Chair Lee Hallman for their leadership and guidance. I also want to acknowledge and thank the planning staff, and in particular Dave Hill and Jack Semino. Special thanks to Commissioners Phillips and Kidwell for taking the time and attention to get this train back on the right track this summer. Not the commuter rail, that's not coming. Thank you to each of you for your commitment to the town of Huntersville and your dedication to our town. I hope you will vote unanimously to approve this draft of the master plan, for which I am very proud.
Thank you. The next person who's signed up to speak is Charles Ginyard. And as former Commissioner Ginyard comes up, I will remind him that he has 3 minutes, and to please state your name and address for the record.
Is that a way of telling me to shut up quickly?
Not at all.
Charles Ginyard, 201 Sherwood Drive, Huntersville, North Carolina. I'm still a newcomer to a couple of people in this room, but I have been here for 44 years. Over 30 years ago, I bought my first piece of property and second and third piece of property in what y'all affectionately call downtown Huntersville. I was coerced by the person that told me to keep my mouth shut tonight to serve on this committee because I was intrigued, interested, et cetera, in the downtown. Gatewood has already surmised this well. I turned around to her when Commissioner Kovac was talking about roundabouts, and I said, is she trying to get my heart to stop? Are there more roundabouts? Praise God, not. I say all that to say I think there is one word that this board that I used to sit on needs to remember. We were more than light years apart. We were eons apart. That's because I'm much older than Gatewood. We voted unanimously that night without any comments. Thank you to Commissioner McCauley and to Lee Holman and their work to make that happen. I urge you to do this, not for my sake, not for the downtown's sake, but for the town's sake. And on a side note, after sitting here and listening to the 911 discussions for over an hour, remember one thing that I don't think y'all were told, and you may all be well aware. Medic is a profit center. They are not an agency of the county. They are, auxiliary is the wrong word. I personally paid over $66 a mile. No lights, no sirens, no meds, no blood pressure cuffs, no nothing, over 10 years ago. They are making money. Like the rest of the world, they are having a hard time staffing up to the needs of this region. Thank you for your allowing us to serve faithfully for the Downtown Committee. I know my 3 minutes are really close. We did vote unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next person who is signed up to speak is former Mayor and Commissioner Sarah McCauley and Chair of the 2023 Downtown Master or Steering Committee.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, I come to you and ask you to vote for this downtown plan as soon as possible so we can start making things additional things happen. There are already some happening. And I will tell you that if you're concerned, we're all concerned about the downtown traffic, it's not going to be solved on Gilead Road. It's going to be on the outreaches, which was beyond this study group. That needs to have your full attention in the future. But right now, please proceed to vote for this plan. Let us get started and working on it. And I thank the board for, on behalf of all those of us that served for the opportunity. I thank the planning staff and the consultants for their leadership in working with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last person who has signed up to speak is former Commissioner Ron Julian, and downtown native.
Ron Julian, 110 North Maxwell. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. I don't think I've been up here and spoke since I've left this dais, but today is a great day. I want to thank the committee for putting this plan together. As many of you guys know, me and Teresa, we built our retirement home downtown Huntersville. It's probably the only new home right now in the downtown. We're looking forward to restaurants and breweries and all kind of places that we can walk to and enjoy. So this is a start to it. So we've supported it. You haven't heard much from us in the way of for or against it. I've got a road going right by my house. Now, I will tell you, I understand that. We hope there will be tons of people downtown. Now, you do have to buy that land, I will tell you that. But don't worry about that. That's not yet. Whenever you're ready. We're excited. We're excited for Huntersville because this is what we need. We hope there'll be many festivals and people will be elbow to elbow. But we're looking forward to the growth here in Huntersville. We don't plan to go anywhere. We're going to be right there. Huntersville's home. But please approve this plan and keep Huntersville going, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions for Mr. Semino? All right, seeing none, we will close that public hearing. And we have another public hearing on petition Annex 23-01. And this is a request by Camden Bowman to annex 33.535 acres into the town of Huntersville. Mr. Farber,
Good.
how are you this evening?
Good, good.
Good to see you.
All right, so I'll enter my staff report into the record. As has already been stated, this is an annexation of the Camden subdivision by the applicant Camden Bowman of 33.442 acres into the town of Huntersville. Here is the plat. And if you have any questions, I can answer those for you.
Open it up for questions. No questions? Okay, then we will close this public hearing. We'll now move to item 9F, and this is to conduct a public hearing on petition Annex 23-02. And this is a request by Bobby McNaughton, Richard Carpenteri, Emily Bice, Logan Ruffin, and April Jimenez, and a Patel to annex 62.593 acres into the town of Huntersville. And you are back.
I am back, and I will enter my staff report again into the record. And I will just say that Bobby McNaughton is representing KB Homes Charlotte LLC.
Thank you.
This annexation is a non-contiguous annexation, so it's a satellite parcel. It is part of the Hills subdivision, and it's 62.593 acres. The property is about 900 feet from the primary corporate limits of the town. The property is a little over a mile from the nearest other primary corporate limits, which is Charlotte. And if annexed, the percentage of satellite property within the Huntersville corporate limits will be 7.7%, which remains under the required 10%. And here is the plat. And if you have any questions, I can answer those for you.
We'll open it up for questions. Any questions? Seeing none, we will close this public hearing. All right, folks, we're now going to move on into other business. The first is to consider this decision on Annex 23-02. Mr. Farber, as you come, do you need to enter your staff report into the record?
And I will enter my staff report into the record. And just to remind you, this is the non-contiguous satellite annexation of the Hills subdivision.
Okay, is there a motion? Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt annexation ordinance 2023-02 and approve petition Annex 23-02, a request by Bobby McNaughton, Richard Carpentieri, Emily Bice, Logan Ruffin, Abril Jimenez, and Shurag Patel to annex 62.593 acres of parcels 021-031-04, 021-031-32, 021-031-07, 021-031-38, 021-033-89 through 021-033-91, 021-033-01 through 021-033-18, 021-033-52 through 021-033-88 into the town of Huntersville.
There is a motion. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Phillips. Any discussion? Can he repeat that? No. No. I followed it to make sure he had it. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. We'll now move to item 10B. And this is to consider consider decision on petition Annex 23-01, a request by Camden Bowman. And Mr. Farber.
And I'll enter my staff report into the record, and this is the contiguous annexation. This one has less numbers involved, if you have any questions.
Is there a motion? Commissioner Partee?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion on petition Annex 23-01 to annex 33.535 acres of parcel numbered 1011-241-04 into the town of Huntersville.
Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Kovacs.
To approve the ordinance and to approve annexation ordinance 2023-01.
Okay. And Commissioner Kovacs, you're good with them? Yes. All right, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move to item 10C. This is a resolution ratifying acceptance of state grant funds for HFFA air filtration system. Mr. Brown, come join us.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So in regards to 10C, the town, in preparation for, or at least the consideration of the potential for future air improvements at HFFA, specifically for the pool space, was able to receive funds direct from the state in their current budget in the amount of $650,000. So Finance may be able to give a little bit more detail on these funds, except this is the step that would be the acceptance for the town to receive those funds and essentially earmark them for that particular project.
Is there a motion? Commissioner Partee?
I would like to make a motion to approve R 2023-10, resolution to ratify acceptance of state grant funds for HFFA filtration system in the amount of $650,000.
Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Kidwell. Any discussion? Commissioner Munger.
Just a question of, I guess, how things move through. Just out of curiosity, if C was passed and D was not passed, what does that do with C? You need to write it down. I'm happy to read. She has laryngitis. She can.
So Bobby worked primarily on this, but the funds were given to the town specifically for the air filtration system.
And I guess I'll take the hint. It was for HVAC upgrades, so it may not necessarily be what is before you tonight. It may be some other version of HVAC upgrades to improve the pool environment in the 50-meter pool.
So those funds could be used in other ways other than, or specifically mentioned in DEEP, as long as they're used for the HVAC-specific systems at HFFA.
It was generically worded in the state budget appropriation for HVAC. We did submit a kind of an initial scope, preliminary scope of services to the state when they treat it like a grant. We had to tell them, hey, here's how we're going to spend the money. So I would want to go back and revise that before I gave you a 100% answer. But it was generically worded enough that suggests you could do some other HVAC, not necessarily one system, but maybe an array of improvements.
All right, thank you.
And I do want to take a second to thank Representative Bradford for securing these funds. And he called last year when they were working through the budget and asked what needs we had. And I shared with him this was a big need and had conversations with our HFFA committee around this. And we put in that ask And so I want to take a moment to say thank you to him for all that hard work that he did to secure them. Are there any other questions around this particular item? Seeing none, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move to item 10D, and this is consider awarding the purchase of HFFA HVAC equipment and installation of services to MSS Solutions. Mr. Brown.
So I prepared a very brief presentation, and just please note also, Board, there are representatives from MSS Solutions as well here. They have a presentation as well as they're welcome to answer any questions you may have. In short, I wanted to give you a quick overview of this overall project, kind of what's been going on, what brings us essentially to today. We are specifically talking about the indoor pool space at HFFA specific to the 50-meter pool space. As you may be aware, there are 2 indoor separate pool spaces with separate air units. We are talking about the larger of the 2 pool spaces, which that particular space has currently 2 dedicated HVAC units and accompanying parts that work to condition the space. The conditioning of the space includes not only temperature, but also exhausting of any expired air, if you will, as well as the injection of fresh air. Since we began operating in the facility in late 2017, both or all 3 units have required ongoing repairs, and the third bullet point there really lists out a lot of what those repairs have entailed. Replacement of motors, compressors, controllers, fuses, and the like, various issues that have arisen. And what's essentially occurred over the years is that as that has happened, as you can imagine with any large-scale commercial equipment replacements, there's a lot of either downtime or less optimal air exchange that's occurring not only during the average operating day, but certainly during events and things of that nature. In order to try and mitigate that and stave off some of those issues and repairs, we've continued to work through some short-term solutions. That includes the installation of some ceiling fans, deck fans, utilizing the increased exhaust from the current units themselves to increase overall airflow into the space. With that said, in about the range of fall of 2021 and through the rest of 2022, we did quite a bit of research analysis, meeting with various groups and interested parties to not only perform repairs, but certainly discuss what potential long-term solutions may exist. So not only do we have site visits at HFFA by various groups to look and inspect and provide opinion, we also went out and visited various sites throughout the local region to better understand what equipment did they have, what is their experience, what size of units, how's the ductwork laid out, what's their overall volume in the space, what do they experience from events and the like, so we could get a better understanding and gather as much detail and data as possible so we could go through a generalized bid process. So a recap of the overall bid process. An RFP was issued in December, or officially on December 2nd. During that time period, we did ask, it was a mandatory pre-bid meeting so that any interested bidders would arrive at HFFA and have an opportunity to see what the issues were that we were looking to correct. 3 potential bidders attended that meeting. However, after that meeting, we only received 2 bids. However, both bids were comprehensive to what the ask was in that bid process. However, after doing extensive research and review, and as well as clarifying responses back from the 2 bidders, it was deemed that MSS Solutions was the lowest responsible bidder. What you're seeing up there then from a dollar figure is essentially the total calculation, including any warranties that may have been requested, certainly the replacement of the units, the installation of those units. Of note, the second bullet point, MSS Solutions also provided the opportunity to replace all interior ductwork, as well as the modifications to the existing interior returns to help with overall airflow and again, continue to improve the space. If this were to move forward, The current project timeline to essentially get the units in and begin installation is estimated to be around fall, winter of 2023. So there is some time needed certainly to engineer, design the final specs, procure items, and then certainly get them on site so they can start the installation process. With that said, that's the end of my direct presentation on the overall scope of the project.
We'll open it up for questions. Commissioner Munger?
You had mentioned MSS is here.
Yes, that's correct.
Do we want to wait for that one? I have a bunch of questions for MSS.
Go ahead.
Okay. So.
MSS, if you would
MSS,
please
I have
come on up.
questions for you. My apologies.
Yep. Okay, and if it's you come, would you please state your name and address for the record? Yes. Thank you.
My name is Allison Dennis. I live at 4300 Waterbury in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm Larry McWilliams. I live at 3921 Sussex Road in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying to understand some of the specifics about what you will be doing and what you won't be doing. So these questions may seem rudimentary, but there is an overall thought process. Is one of the items that you're doing is building an automation system for the HVAC?
The pool units themselves will come with a control system, a web-based control system for the 50-meter pool, the units that control the climate for the 50-meter pool. We will not be providing a building automation system for the entire building.
Okay. Will you be modifying the existing diffuser's air pattern towards the pool?
So as Zach mentioned, our bid included replacement of the existing metal ductwork in the space with fabric ductwork, which will have a antimicrobial coating, which is much better suited for a corrosive environment like a pool space than metal ductwork. As part of that replacement, we will evaluate the airflow pattern of the new ductwork that we put in the space with the intent of focusing more airflow on the pool surface and other critical spaces like upwards towards the ceiling, and try to clear as many of the chloramines and things like that off the pool surface.
Okay. And in relation to the ductwork itself, when you go through and replace it, will you be responsible for the removal of that ductwork that is no longer used?
Yes, we will dispose of the old ductwork.
Okay. And will you be working on air distribution devices?
I'm not sure I understand what you're at. So do you mind repeating that for me?
Air distribution devices.
So the fabric ductwork is a porous material. It has holes that direct the airflow out of the fabric ductwork. It doesn't have the same type of drum louver type air distribution that you see existing in the space. That's what you're asking. So one of our proposed alternates in our original proposal included changing the direction of the existing air distribution devices in the space. But with the replacement of the ductwork, that will no longer be necessary. All the direction of the airflow will be handled as part of the design of the fabric ductwork system.
Okay. Will you be doing any cleaning or leak testing of existing ductwork or piping?
I believe that was specifically excluded from our proposal.
So and that basically just covers the existing ductwork, because you'll be replacing it, you'll do leak testing of any
new
thing you're putting in.
Any new piping, yes, we will leak test. There will not be, I guess you're talking about like a duct pressure test. It's not necessary for the fabric ductwork in the space. Plus, the supply ductwork is all exposed within the space, so the air is generally all going to the same place. What I will say is we're replacing the ductwork that's inside the pool space. We are not replacing the ductwork on the roof except to the extent necessary to replace the existing units.
Okay. We don't have any concerns about any of the ductwork on the roof? Possibly a question for gentleman behind you.
My personal opinion is that I believe it's an existing condition, and we were not able to determine any issues with the existing ductwork, but if it's determined during the construction process, then we'll bring that to the attention of Zach and his team and figure out a way to solve that problem. But
Okay,
our
'cause-
assumption is that it's functional.
There's something interesting about what you just said, and I'm just going to say maybe that was just the external ductwork, because you said you determined there's not anything wrong with the existing ductwork, but we're here because the existing ductwork failed? No, are we not?
No, it's not necessarily that the existing ductwork has failed, it's the units themselves that are not operational. Any of the external on the roof ductwork that they would be replacing would be whatever needs to be realigned in order to fit the new units. It's not as, unfortunately, I don't have necessarily a great analogy, but unlike a car where you may be able to change the outer shell, but all the other piping stays the same, this is not the case. So any ductwork that would need to modify to fit within the specs of the new units would be getting replaced.
So we're only replacing the ductwork as it relates to its capabilities within the new system that's being implemented.
I would say that we're replacing the ductwork that has to do with the physical distribution of the air to the space. The ductwork on the roof simply carries the air from the unit into the space. It doesn't actually deliver it across the existing spaces, surfaces, walls, ceiling, anything like that. The reason we propose going to a fabric duct solution is because it gives a more even air distribution pattern. We're able to space the amount of airflow out across the entire length of the perimeter of the pool, whereas the current air distribution pattern, there's a diffuser every, say, 30, 40, 50 feet, and then they're directionally aimed. So the kind of air is, you're limited in the amount of coverage you have because you're limited by the number of diffusers, whereas with the fabric ductwork, it's more of a continuous delivery of airflow.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this HVAC system is specifically to the pool, not the entire facility. Okay, important to know. All right. Should there be a need to cut a new hole or create anything to accommodate the new HVAC system, you're saying that's something you're not going to be responsible for, or is that?
If we would not have excluded something that we felt was necessary for the project. I guess if that answers your question. Our scope of we feel like it's not going to be a requirement of the project to cut a hole in the roof, ceiling, or wall, or else we would have included it.
But should that happen, then it's a separate negotiation? Is that what we're saying?
I guess if it were to happen, then in my opinion, it would require a change in the scope of the project.
Good to know. All right. And will there be any instance for a need of a temporary HVAC or utilities?
I believe it depends on the time period when the work is completed. So as we stated in our proposal, our understanding was that the busy season for the pool begins, I think like September timeframe with the start of high school swimming sports.
Sure.
And ends, say, February timeframe as spring begins. The schedule of the project is somewhat limited by the procurement of the equipment. If you're not familiar with the HVAC equipment industry right now, lead times are extravagant on just about
Like everything else in this world at this point.
So the proposed equipment that we've included for the project, as of a few weeks ago, was at about 34 weeks to have it delivered to us before we can install it on the roof. When we submitted our original bid, I'd say we'd anticipated a mid-February release on the project.
2024? Mid-February 2024 is?
Well, no, so.
Sorry, my apologies. I
We're
didn't.
anticipating a release on the project mid-February 2023, which would give us, start our design process, our releasing subcontractors to produce shop drawings, and then our ability to release equipment for production. So, as it's kind of pushed out a few weeks from that point, 34 weeks puts us close to the end of the year. So that kind of falls right in the middle of your busy season for the pool. So what we've explained to Zach is that we have the ability to either start during the busy season and
and kind of work through what is going on. Can we work through a downtime? Can we replace the equipment over a weekend? All that scheduling stuff will be worked out as we begin the construction process with our project management team. Or we can hold the equipment in our warehouse in Charlotte until we get to, say, March, and the pool is less busy, and potentially avoid the need for rental equipment on the project altogether. So it's something that was kind of need to be worked through, but a specific part of the bid did not request the inclusion of rental equipment, so we did not include it.
Okay, so if there were a need, it would be a separate negotiation?
Right.
Okay. And then the only other one, I guess I just had a question about, was the abatement and/or testing of hazardous materials. Is that not a standard thing?
Given the construction year of the building being 2001, it's highly unlikely that any asbestos was utilized in the construction of the building, so we exclude that from our scope, just in case it's requested, just due to the fact that it would be highly unlikely that it was used. So if it's something that...
So this is asbestos specific?
Yes.
All right. So everything I just read to you is on your proposal does not include. And one of the specifics, kind of, we talked about modification of existing diffusers, air pattern towards the pool. It did sound like that was something that would actually fall within scope.
Yes, as part of the, so we listed that out as two different things.
Yeah.
One was going to be if we kept the existing metal ductwork,
Uh-huh.
and then the other is if we replaced the fabric ductwork, right? Both of those give us the ability to adjust the airflow pattern more towards the pool. We felt like the fabric ductwork option gives you a more continuous direction of that airflow at the pool surface. So yes, I believe you're correct that either one of those options would include modifying the air distribution.
Okay, so I would ask that any motion that be made remove that particular item. Additionally, I am not comfortable with the bottom one, if not specifically included above, the item has been excluded. I know it's kind of a catch-all.
What are you, go back to what did you say exactly that you,
It would be modification of existing diffusers air pattern towards the pool. Based on what we're hearing here, that would be something that should not be specifically excluded. And that's probably the extent of my questions. Thank you.
Just to clarify, you're talking about the air distribution devices between heat trace and BIM and coordination?
If I look at the proposal and I go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bullet points, there's a line, that, and this is under, this proposal does not include modification of existing diffusers air pattern towards the pool. And based on what we've just heard, that is something that should actually be included in this proposal.
I think that one was added to the exclusions after the discussion of so like I said, there were two alternates proposed. One was fabric ductwork, one was a modification of the existing air distribution devices. So when we met with Zach, he told us the intent was to use the fabric ductwork. So at that point, we added the exclusion of modifying the existing air distribution devices, because that is not going to be part of our scope. Does that make sense?
So
We can strike it, it doesn't matter to me, but.
were there add-ons? There were add-ons after the original proposal, right, Zach?
All the add-ons were included in the original proposal. They were just broken out for clarity of scope because the scope did not specifically ask for the modifications. The scope was basically a performance-based scope, and we provided alternates to kind of level the field to say, this is how we feel like you can get to the requested performance. But since it wasn't explicitly required, we broke it out as a separate cost.
So that may be where this page is getting. Emily, you squaring it?
yep. Any other questions, Commissioner Munger? Any other questions, Commissioner Kidwell?
Yes. Just going on this, the modification of existing diffusers, air pattern towards the pool would be if the ductwork remained up there and you did not replace it, correct?
Yes.
Right. And you're putting up new fabric ductwork, so the existing diffuser air pattern won't be there.
Correct.
Thank you. Second question is for Zach. Mr. Brown, if you could step up. The Dectron units on top of the building is the same as the existing dehumidification units, correct?
Correct.
Right. And when we replace those, we are replacing the ductwork that they're attached to going into the building.
There is a section, there will be sections that would not, because it would be redundant to change out that ductwork. But any ductwork to change with the fitment of the new units would be getting changed.
One of the things that we had discussed during the HFFA meetings was, and then maybe you can answer this from a technical standpoint, is the airflow coming from the dehumidification units was being stifled by the way the ductwork flowed into the pool area. Are we correcting that, or are we not correcting that?
So I believe we are correcting that. I can't 100% say that the existing ductwork is the reason that you're having the maintenance issues you are with the unit. It's one theory. I feel like it's more likely that you're having issues from compressor cycling due to the way the Dectron units are designed, the number of compressors inside the units. But to answer your question, the fabric ductwork itself operates on a very low static pressure requirement. So once you build up that amount of static pressure, the ductwork kind of inflates equally, and then the air distribution, the air kind of makes its way out of the ductwork. It's almost like
I've seen it.
kind of like blowing up a balloon, and then the pressure kind of equalizes throughout the ductwork system. Whereas when you're working with a metal type ductwork system and the existing type of air distribution devices, it's kind of an equal-based friction loss system. So if you go in the space, you'll notice that the ductwork reduces in size as it goes down. Each one of those reductions in sizes, each one of the air distribution taps is a pressure loss. And each one of those pressure losses creates, makes the fan work harder to deliver the airflow that's required. Therefore, the more of that you have, potentially the less airflow you're delivering. All that to say that I don't believe the existing ductwork system is creating so much resistance that it's causing unit failure, but it's making the unit work harder and therefore you use more energy to deliver the airflow to the space.
Kind of like electricity. If you're 50 feet from an outlet where you plugged in, you're pretty good, but the longer you get away and you don't go up in size on gauge and cord,
right,
the harder it is on the tool you're using. So I understand that. Thank you.
Commissioner Kovacs?
How long is the new unit intended to last?
So like with any mechanical piece of equipment, there's no way to say for sure. However, I will say that a few things. As part of this proposal, we've provided a 2-year parts, 5-year labor warranty, which is above and beyond what you would see in an industry standard. Also, the unit that we're proposing is all aluminum construction, which is corrosion resistant to the pool environment. All the coils have aluminum casings. All the coils have corrosion resistant coatings. So in my opinion, the unit that we're providing is above and beyond what you would get from a standard pool dehumidification unit that is bought from one of the other major manufacturers. And my estimated lifespan would probably be in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 years.
Any other questions? Commissioner Munger?
Zach, how much is HFFA projected to lose this year?
I'm sorry?
How much is that HFFA projected to lose this year?
Well, we are seeing things turn more positive overall. So it's I don't want to say it's still too early to tell, but certainly we're making a cut into that deficit. I'd say approximately off the cuff, about $350,000.
Okay, so we're coming back near net zero of sorts?
Correct, yeah. We are certainly seeing an increase in membership, increase in events overall. And so with that accompanied with some reduced expenses, we are seeing that come to a point where we were seeing back in 2018, 2019.
Okay. And have we, or has HFFA had a negative net effect due to the opening of the North Mech Recreation Center? Regional, sorry.
So I will say possibly. Certainly there, from a geographic standpoint, there will be individuals that would utilize North Mech more than HFFA, just due to location. Unfortunately, it's a little difficult to be able to pinpoint and say that is the exact reason, only because we are still rebuilding out of COVID. When we came out of the shutdown of the facility and all memberships were terminated, we are in the process of regrowing that membership base. So it is unfortunately not exactly, we're not capable of pinpointing specific to this facility opens, so this is why we're seeing the metrics that we're seeing today. I will say, however, that even with that facility being open, there are certainly some things that we offer that are uniquely different than what they offer. Certainly, it's brand new. Certainly, pricing's different. And they have a little bit of different options, as I've mentioned. However, we have seen from a membership growth standpoint, January, February were some of the strongest that we've ever not only experienced, but also have seen from historical data. So we are rapidly approaching the amount of membership growth in the beginning of this year, 2023, to what we gained overall all of 2022. And so, yes, I do think that there's been an impact, but I can't unfortunately answer very detailed answer as to what that impact is.
Gotcha. Jackie, I have a question for you. If memory serves, our budget surplus at this point is approximately 50 million, give or take a couple mil? And if I remember right, you did a full-on, lovely breakdown of what 50 million actually is. And yeah, you're gonna have to speak on the mic, sorry. After you got down to the breakdown of everything that's actually allocated one way or another, I believe the number, Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, was somewhere between $8 and $8.5 million of free to spend funds.
I would have said 8, in the neighborhood of 8 million, yes, sir.
Okay. So just want to call this out specifically to the board because we, not on this motion, but on the next motion, are about to allocate 1.3 million of those $8 million, I believe, to a single fix for HFFA. That's all.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions at this point? Commissioner Phillips.
So if this gets turned down, then what happens?
At this juncture, if it gets turned down and there is not a vote or approval to push out a new bid, we would continue as is, attempting to keep the units running as best as possible to serve the various user groups in the space. That may mean, certainly with the mitigation strategies we've done, we have seen some improvement in the space, similar to life cycle of all those units. I can't stand here and guarantee that any and all of those will be a long-term fix. They were all viewed truly as short-term. It will, there's always potential that as things may deteriorate, they may not be able to be replaced. The biggest challenge we have right now with the current units and the provider of those units is with everything being so proprietary, if there's something that goes down, it is weeks and months until it can be replaced. So we obviously have some contingencies for the short-term responses to those so that we can try to provide the best space possible.
Okay, this has been going on for a while now. What would happen if we just waited to do this after the budget? I don't know if that's a Jackie, a you.
At the current time, we have been made aware by not only MSS, but certainly the manufacturers that if we prolong this project, costs are going to go up. So we are at a very thin margin right now that if we were to delay this project, there would be adjustments in price.
what kind of percentage of adjustment, do you know?
If I'm not was it 5%, I believe? Approximately about 5%.
Just to clarify, as I mentioned about the the lead times of equipment, also over the last 2.5 years, probably as everything, material cost increases have been, I mean, the HVAC industry, we see 3 to 5% every 3 months as equipment manufacturers. So we've done our best negotiation to hold pricing as long as we possibly can. But at some point, we could lose that power to negotiate with them. So
Thank you. Commissioner Kidwell?
Yeah, well, Commissioner Phillips, are you done?
I just need to put it out there that, Munger's done about convinced me out of this. Because I hate it when we have things that should be a budget item come to us outside of the budget scope, because it's all matters, it's all immaterial. And then sitting here and thinking about Jackie's beautiful little fund balance getting chopped down, and then what'll happen is come like budget time, we forget that this discussion happened, and it's not in the upcoming budget, but it's a spend that's affecting our books. It's been I remember hearing about this last budget, last year, and here we are just now addressing it. I know government moves slow, but at this point, I almost rather chance 15% increase, have it part of the budget discussions, and then it get passed with our budget when we do that in July?
June.
July at the latest, so.
So
June.
our plan is to adopt budget at the first meeting in June.
That's 2 months away.
Commissioner Kidwell?
Jackie or Zach, how much have we spent right now trying to make the system work for the swim activities we have?
Zach, we did a budget amendment toward the end of fiscal '22. It was 6 figures. It was in excess of 150. Was it 250, 300? Do you remember how?
It's like 180 or so, isn't it?
Yeah, so it has, what we've been experiencing is it's been increasing. The main budget amendment that occurred was the mitigation that needed to be done to get us through the summer of 2022. Leading up into 2022, the units were even below optimal, even suboptimal, that unfortunately going into those hot, humid months, we knew that the units were not going to be capable to really do much of anything in the space. So we were certainly utilizing everything that we had at our disposal in that moment. So there was a budget amendment that was done for a contract. I believe it was about 185 just for that contract to get us through and up. The main reason why we had that issue was due to controllers and parts availability. The controllers from all other general vendors, if we were looking to just replace that itself, Dectron not only first was unresponsive, second, when they were responsive, they were unable to engineer or provide the appropriate equipment to replace. So the solution that was chosen to get us through the summer was to do essentially a hybrid to get those controllers back up and get us to a point that was the space was appropriately usable throughout the summer.
Commissioner Kidwell? I would say that this has been an ongoing issue, as you've heard, for a long time. It's a lot of money, and I don't disagree with each one of you that has spoken. I would say sometimes our HVAC fails, and we have to fix it. And I would like to remind you that there are kids and teenagers and adults swimming in that pool and in that space each and every day. Mr. Roberts.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to maybe add a little clarity to Commissioner Phillips' question. So if we were to push this out, we may would go back to, like Bobby said, and look and see if we could use the 650 to continue to, for lack of better terms, Band-Aid the system longer. And that's what basically we did with the 185, was to go in and do some controller changes and like I said, kind of modify the system to make it work and make it usable. That's what we would do until the board pull the trigger a different way. That's what we would try to do.
I would prefer to exercise that option, because I'm sitting here looking at Major Graham and thinking of all the times I've sat up here and got mad at his department for making ask outside of our budget. So it's not fair for me to treat one group one way and then treat another group a different way. And I think we need to be mindful of $1 million+ coming out of the fund balance, because that's really going to be shaking and rattling some stuff.
I don't have a presentation related to 10E, but as a layperson, if you don't mind, I would walk through exactly what's going on here. 10C was our acceptance of a grant with the state of North Carolina. Did absolutely nothing with budget. Should you choose to vote in favor of 10D tonight, that's a contract just south, a little bit less than $2 million. That's a contract to pay these folks to have them do changes to the current system. Ballpark $2 million, it's a little bit less. Item 10E would recognize the revenue and expense associated with that $650,000 would not pay for a nearly $2 million contract. There's not $1,350,000 in the HFFA fund. So to meet the obligation, should you choose to approve item 10D, you're gonna have to do a budget amendment to have a funding source for that. So the other $1,350,000 would come out of general fund balance. Is it possible to use some tourism funds for that? Sure, tourism is a segment of the general fund, and so that's just the chronological order of C, D, and E. If you don't approve D, there's no reason for you to consider E, except eventually to spend any of the $650,000 from the state, you're gonna have to eventually do that portion of the budget amendment.
Quick question. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Kidwell.
I apologize.
Yeah, it's HFFA, not you, Zach. Not in your company, but the building itself was something that many years ago came to be part of the town. We signed a 99-year lease with the county. We agreed to fund it. If we're not going, and it's been operating, I don't think we've ever turned a profit. We still owe a ton of money. How much do you owe on that building?
Wasn't the building opened in 2001?
Yeah, so 22 years ago, but we still owe,
Years you had a 20-year anniversary.
we still owe $10 million, $8 million.
How much was spent?
We haven't made a dent, is my
Lot.
point. We have not made a dent. Unfortunately, it's not going away unless we shutter it right now, tell every person that is a member over there, go find somewhere else to work out, tell every swim program to find another pool within Charlotte to have a diving, their diving meets. I mean, so you have to make a decision. Absolutely, if you want to go the $650,000 route and keep piecemealing it, we will burn through that $650 quicker than you think, because these units have been band-aided beyond belief. But, yeah, this board has got to vote as a whole, so I'm just throwing it out there. Unless you want to shutter the building, put concrete in the pools, fill it up, and make it just a big old rec center for Parks and Rec, and kill these swim programs within Mecklenburg County and most of Charlotte, we need to do something.
I will just take a brief moment to remind this board that because this is a contract, it takes 4 votes to pass this. Just so everybody's aware, it's not a 3-2 or anything like that. Commissioner Munger.
I think everyone's made several good points, and I apologize to you two. You're kind of just trying to do your job, totally get it, appreciate the answers you've given. I also want, because there's so many things at play, and that we need 4 votes to pass a contract, and I honestly, I mean, I'm torn. I'm all over the place, because I want kids to be able to enjoy the pool, and I know it's one of the few places in Mecklenburg County, especially on the north side, where they can actually participate in the swim sports, the diving sports, and things like that. It's killing me. My thought process at this point is at a minimum to defer for 2 weeks, and with the possibility of looking at making this a part of the overall budget process, because I think it's unfair at this moment in time, A, because we are missing one of our commissioners to actually vote with the possibility that this would not pass. So if I could make,
I would ask a quick question of
Yep.
Zach. If there is a motion to defer this, I know that there was conversation about putting this on the last agenda, and then that didn't happen. Is there an issue, a potential issue with the contract if it's deferred another 2 weeks?
I might ask to clarify what you mean by issue with the contract.
Well, I just mean, is it still valid? Would it still be a valid contract for the board to vote on in 2 weeks?
I don't want to.
Because of potential increases?
Yeah, based on discussions we've had, and I certainly do not say this to sway a response or votes for this evening, it is our understanding that if this were to defer, then a price increase would need to be considered in any future vote.
That's what I wanted the board to hear, because he said that at the last HFFA meeting. So just so that everybody has all the same information. Okay, Commissioner Partee?
Make a motion to award contract for HVAC equipment replacement and installation services to MSS Solutions with an amendment to the proposal to remove, modify modifications of existing diffusers, air patterns towards the pool, to page 2 exclusions,
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Kidwell. Any additional discussion?
I would like to make a substitute motion to defer this vote until April 17th, 2023 at Huntersville Town Hall.
second,
At the time.
You have to add the time, please, to your motion.
6 p.m.
still second.
All right, there is a motion to defer and a second. All those in favor? And those opposed? That motion passes. The contract, this will come back to this town board at the next board meeting.
Clarification, do we have to make a motion to defer 10E as well?
Yes?
Okay, my apologies.
Make it.
Is there a motion on item 10E, and this is, no, I'm so sorry. Hold on a second. Give me a moment. Yes, with the budget amendment. 10E is consider approving budget amendment appropriating $650,000 to grant revenue and capital expense and appropriating fund balance of $1.35 million in capital expense. Is there a motion? Commissioner Munger.
Motion to defer action on budget amendment for HFFA air filtration system to April 17th at Town Hall at 6 p.m.
Second.
There's a motion, there is a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries. We're now to item 10F. Consider adopting a revised resolution to acquire right-of-way and easements necessary for the construction of the adopted and funded Beatty's Ford at Hambright Road project. Mr. Trott. Hey, how are you?
Hey, good evening. Excuse me. The resolution in front of you tonight is just to revise the list of parcels. One of the parcels has been subdivided. The Aspire parcel was subdivided since the last resolution was adopted, so this resolution is, the only change from the previous one is showing the 2 parcels for the Aspire School instead of 1. You have to answer any other questions.
Is there a motion?
I have a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve a revised resolution to acquire right-of-way and easements.
I'm sorry, would you mind holding that motion?
Absolutely, sorry.
Anybody want to make, Commissioner Partee, you sit on the Aspire Board of Directors, do you not? So there needs to be a motion to recuse Commissioner Partee.
Motion to recuse Commissioner Partee from, where are we at here? Sorry. 10F, revision of the previously approved resolution to acquire right-of-way.
Second.
There is a motion and there is a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. Commissioner Partee, if you wouldn't mind stepping away. I want to make sure that we do everything on the up and up. All right, Commissioner Munger.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve a revised resolution to acquire right-of-way and easements necessary for the construction of the adopted and funded Beatty's Ford at Hambright project to include 2 new parcels created by a recent subdivision, parcels 015-151-79 and 015-151-80.
He has all the numbers tonight. Any discussion? Commissioner Kidwell.
Yes, when this originally passed, did we remove number 2 under the resolution? In the event if the parcels or interest exhibit cannot be acquired by negotiations at the price authorized above, the town manager through council may institute and pursue acquisition by process of eminent domain?
That's not what's in the packet. The removal wasn't in the packet.
When was the original passed? I guess I should ask them.
Ms. Sloop, do you know when, or Mr. Trott?
I'll need to go pull it up. I don't have it on me.
It's been a while.
Not years. Pull it up if you like.
Well, any new projects has that clause out, right? Anything that started before that board's approved, I guess, still has a clause in it. We changed it once the board said change it. Any new project moving forward, take that out.
Same, yes, have all had the same, everything new since then has all had the same wording.
Okay.
Eminent domain has to come back before the board.
All right, there is a motion and there is a second. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion. Commissioner, he had to be recused. He sits on the board of directors for Aspire. All right, so that motion carries. And make a motion to bring Commissioner Partee back.
Can I make a motion to bring Commissioner Partee back to the
Is there a
dais?
second? There is a second. Thank you, Commissioner Kidwell. All those in favor? Any opposed? Saying none. If we can get Commissioner Partee.
Probably 19 or 20.
We will now move to item 10G, and this is appointment to the Parks and Rec Commission. This is the replacement from Mr. Harrington when he resigned, leaving that vacancy. The term expires December of 2023. What we will do is go down the line here, and everybody will give me a name. Commissioner Munger.
Frank Freeman.
Freeman. Commissioner Partee.
Mr. Patel.
Commissioner Kidwell.
Frank Freeman.
Commissioner Kovacs.
Frank Freeman.
And Commissioner Phillips.
Patel.
Patel. Mr. Freeman has been, yes. Thank you. Mr. Freeman has 3 votes. Is there a motion to appoint Mr. Freeman to the Parks and Rec Commission?
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Frank Freeman to the Parks and Recreation Board.
Thank you, Commissioner Munger, and there is a second. Thank you, Commissioner Partee. All those in favor? None opposed. We now move to item 10H, and this is the Homeland Security Revenue to Police Capital Expense Account. Major Graham.
Yes, ma'am.
Good seeing you this evening.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for having me here tonight. I've got a memorandum requesting to purchase equipment through asset forfeiture funds. I've submitted this through the town manager, and he's passing on to you folks. We're looking to purchase new handguns, light towers, replace a motorcycle, and equipment vehicle, and some electric vehicle for our parks and rec, for our greenway, so we could use during that and town events.
Very good. Is there a motion?
I have discussion.
The board would prefer discussion? Okay, go ahead.
So, Barry, and thanks for sending out the asset forfeiture email. I think we went through a presentation not too long ago, so I was pretty aware of that. I had sent an email, I got stuck, and it actually went through a different mailbox, but I found it and got it to you. But I sent a lot of questions, in terms of why we're changing in firearms, what we're going to, what's happening to the existing firearms, light tower question, motorcycle question, transport van question, the golf cart on the greenway question. And I think it's important to have all board members here. I would like to make a motion to postpone this until April 17th, 2023, 6 p.m. here at Town Hall.
Sounds good. Second. There is a motion, and there is a second from Commissioner Kovacs. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the deferral? Those opposed? That is a 3-2. It will be brought back at the next board meeting.
I do have a question. Do you want me to respond in writing, or I've prepared for most of those questions as well, so.
I would prefer you respond in writing to the entire board.
Okay, we can do that. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 10I, and that is the adopt resolution to accept settlement agreement for parcel 017111305 for the construction of the Main Street improvement projects. Mr. Trott, I believe this was removed by Commissioner Kidwell. Commissioner Kidwell, do you have questions?
Yeah, I do, and this might sound odd, but looking back through this, this was approved back in 2017. This resolution here for parcels for the Main Street, the two-way pair here, but why are we getting this? Why was this in the consent agenda for 2023?
This is a settlement agreement for a condemnation case. It's active, and Anthony or Emily may be able to. We've got eight total left.
Have we built on these parcels? Have we built on these parcels that we're still?
Yes.
Okay. And it says the parties came to agreement. Did the end user of this property, the owner of this property, come to agreement, or were they told?
Yes, it was an actual mediator, lawyers on both sides, and town folks involved, staff, and the property owner, maybe, and daughter. all on, I'm gonna say Zoom, WebEx, whatever we used that day. That was a 4-hour meeting,
So an agreement was settled.
absolutely.
Thank you. I just wanted the clarification since this was signed way back when, brought back before us. Thank you.
So is there a motion? Oh, Commissioner Munger.
Since we're talking about it, I see 7 parcels with no name. Does that mean we're still trying to figure out who owns those parcels? Just curious.
I can tell him who owns the parcels later.
Is he in the room?
I'm not going to answer that.
Is that a
Is
question?
that a question for Stephen? Stephen, you, I don't know. Are you looking them up?
Yeah, I'm scrolling through the list. I did not bring the resolution before the board. However, I believe some of the parcels were resolved. Say they were listed on here, but I think some of the parcels were resolved to either not be there or a combination of other parcels through that acquisition process. Don't have every single one.
Thank you. Sorry for catching you off guard.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion to adopt resolution to accept settlement agreement for parcel 017111305 for the construction of the Main Street Improvements Project. Again.
Don't you have to list every parcel ID?
Nope, just that one right there.
Checking. Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Munger. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. We will now move to Mayor and Commissioner reports. Commissioner Phillips.
Yes, ma'am. From Visit Lake Norman, the Carolina Big Dive Meet was recently held March 22nd through the 21st at Huntersville Family Fitness and Aquatic Center. Youth Dive Meet featured 104 divers from 7 states. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Kovacs.
Lake Norman Chamber, Friday, April 21st, the Chamber will host a Focus Friday with United States Congressman Richard Hudson, Republican. Representative Hudson has served in Congress since 2013, currently representing North Carolina's 9th Congressional District, sits on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and was elected by his colleagues to the House leadership as 4th in line to the Speaker for the 118th Congress. It is a virtual program, and attendees must call the Chamber for the Zoom credentials. Other Chamber events include a business networking event Thursday, April 20th, 5:30 to 7 at Hideaway Lake Norman, and several other professional development seminars, ribbon cuttings, and networking events can be found at lakenormanchamber.org.
Commissioner Kidwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I found out today that CRTPO has canceled their April meeting. The TCC committee meeting was canceled, so the board at CRTPO decided that we didn't have enough agenda items to talk about, so they canceled it as well.
Okay. Commissioner Partee.
Thank you, Mayor. I have an announcement from the Huntersville Fire Department. Today, our stations began annual fire hydrant inspections throughout the town. The inspections will occur during the weekdays. If you will see fire apparatus and crews out inspecting and flowing water from the hydrants to ensure operation. If you experience some discoloration in your water from nearby flushing, run the cold water at 1 tap for 5 minutes to see if it clears. If it does not clear, wait an hour and try again. When the water runs clear, flush any taps where discolored water has been present. If not clear after 1 hour, call 311 to report issues. And that's from the Huntersville Fire Department. And as always, I will advocate for gun safety, especially in homes where guns are stored and children are present. Accidental and intentional discharge causes serious injury and death. The Huntersville Police Department has free gun safety locks. Organizations and individuals can contact the police department or me at dpart@huntersville.org. Let's be child safe. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Munger.
Thank you, Mayor. This Thursday, April 6, 2023, at 3:30 p.m., the HOAB, that's the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board, will be meeting here at Huntersville Town Hall, where we'll be discussing where we will be discussing placement of street trees, buffer yards, and solar energy facilities. Next Wednesday, April 12th, 2023, at 6:30 p.m. at the Rotunda, the Public Arts Commission will be meeting. The agenda is not yet released. And as always, if you have the opportunity to give, please consider supporting our wonderful, spectacular, magnificent local nonprofits. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a bit of a report. My first report will be the EDC. We'll let you know that the Pivot program is getting ready to launch, and the Pivot program is an internship. It's an advanced manufacturing internship opportunity for 21 high school students ages 16 to 18. Whether they're in public school, private school, or charter school, they have the ability to apply. And the Pivot program, it's an 8-week program. It's 160 hours. Students would be working in the realm of advanced manufacturing, and again, it's a summer internship. Also, last Friday, the EDC and the Lake Norman Education Collaborative took students from Hopewell, North, and Huff on the Journey 360 program, and that also took roughly 60 students through 3 different advanced manufacturing facilities. We toured Keller Technologies, Forbo, and Pester USA in the business park. Then they turned around and bussed over to CPCC, the Marenkas campus, and had a tour of the facilities there and the programming, and then had an opportunity to sit down and talk with the folks at CPCC regarding educational opportunities once they come out of high school to land those jobs at those manufacturing facilities. Also, we'll be doing a speed networking event that's upcoming on April the 25th. And I would like to remind everyone that we currently have 4.56 million square feet of active commercial and industrial projects, either in review or under construction currently. The MTC, I'm sure everybody listened and have seen the MTC discussions around cats and the derailment. We were given an update, and we'll continue to get updates, kind of where CATS is. And the MTC requested an outside assessment. So there will be entities coming in to look at the operations of CATS to make sure that CATS is frankly doing the right thing out there in regards to public transit. But I think that there were a few things that I would share with you that I was very disturbed by. The first one was that derailment, and while I say derailment, the train did not actually come off the tracks. But that derailment happened May 21st, and we had a MTC meeting May 25th, and it was never brought up and never addressed. And that was a huge concern. The other concerns that I heard were that it wasn't just the derailment, but that the line has been overdue for repair and replacement on those trains, and that in addition, they had not done the inspections around the bridges nor the garages, the parking garages, and that is supposed to be done, I believe, every 2 years, and had not been done since 2019. So that isn't going to be an ongoing issue that myself and the other mayors, along with Commissioner Altman from the county, will continue to stay abreast of what's happening there, and I will bring information back to you as I get it. On a different note, I would like to make sure to highlight the Loch Norman Highland Games. That is April the 15th and the 16th. We are going to have a community engagement table out there. So for members of the board who can come out, I've already signed up and I will be volunteering at that informational table. And I look forward to seeing not only Huntersville residents, but residents from all over the region and frankly, from all over the United States as they come and descend on Rural Hill and for the Highland Games. And last but not least, I would be remiss if I did not tell you that Huntersville has won 2 weeks in a row of the Mayor's Fitness Challenge. I hope that we seal week 3, and we'll find that out tomorrow. I want to thank the commissioners for coming out and bowling with the board. We did pickleball, y'all, this morning. My legs are hurting. Between the midpoint exercises at Bailey yesterday, which I have to also brag on Huntersville. We had 14 people out there. Cornelius had 12 and Davidson had 13, but we showed up. And I want to thank all of the residents for who are showing up and participating in this community event. And hopefully we will bring that trophy home to Huntersville for the very first time. And that is a very long-winded report. But as I get more information with all of these various things, I will forward all that out to you. Is there anything else? Any closing comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Good night, Huntersville.